Hello. I'm hoping we have gone live. Welcome to our second online international Teachmeet event. We have an absolute wonderful selection of speakers today, and I can't wait to hear them all speak. My name's Dan. I'm a head of secondary at an international school in Germany, and I'm really delighted to be hosting this today. Thankfully, I'm not presenting, although I am slightly nervous about all the back-end tech that's going on, but hopefully it will work fine, and hopefully everyone can see me and hear me okay. So first up, I've got someone who I know pretty well, actually. I'm going to add her to the stream now. So hopefully, here's Freya.
Hi, hello.
Freya. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Lovely to see you on a Saturday afternoon. Really excited about your talk today. Do you want to give us a brief overview of what you're going to be talking about?
So I'm going to be talking about academic writing because it's an area that I'm really, really interested in with regard to the IB particularly. But we do know each other very well. So this is weird. This is like, hi.
I know. Hi. It's great. I mean, we've seen each other recently, actually, at a Research Ed event, but also we used to work together. So miss you loads, but I'm so happy that you get to talk today. If you're ready, we may as well kick off, right? We may as well get you started and start you presenting.
Yeah,
Should we do this? Okay, I'm going to add your slides, and I'm going to remove myself. So it's over to you, Freya.
Okay. Afternoon, everybody. It is really nice to be at another international event. I think it's so important that we have these international events, thinking about what we do within the international sector and celebrating everything that we do as well. So, as Dan said, my name is Freya O'Dell, and I am a teacher of English at St. George's British International School in Rome. And in this session today, I'm going to be talking about an area that I am really, really interested in and will be exploring further across the year as part of my own professional development. And that's the topic of academic writing. Now, I'm not going to promise any answers, unfortunately, today, because it's definitely an area of improvement for me. But I do want to share some initial observations and thoughts and raise lots of questions. So I'm going to bombard you all with questions today that might prompt our thinking in terms of how we support students with academic writing, mainly in the IB, but then working obviously back throughout the years. And then hopefully Dan might invite me back and I'll be able to share some of the work that I've done throughout the year as well. So the reason that I am interested in academic writing is because it matters. Being able to write in an academic style is essential to disciplinary learning and critical thinking for academic success. And in actual fact, across the years, academic writing and writing itself plays a significant part in all of the programs our students study. At IB, students undertake the EE, a 4,000-word essay. They complete IAs within their subject areas, and they also have to prepare their personal statements for university. At IGCSE, coursework tasks are set in a variety of subjects of around 1,500 words in length, and pupils are asked to construct essay responses within examination conditions. Similarly, as part of the NYP program, pupils need to demonstrate their ability to know and understand, communicate, analyse, think critically, and evaluate. Even at Key Stage 3, the British National Curriculum, a curriculum many international schools employ, insists that pupils must construct effective compositions in which ideas are formed, articulated, and organised coherently for their readers. So being able to write academically is a requirement of all our students within a secondary context. But we know that it also matters, doesn't it? Because the demands on academic writing will only increase once our IB students arrive at university, where they will be expected to write a lot and do so much more independently as part of their degree programme. And yeah, every year when the EE drafts come in, the first drafts come in, it's quite obvious to me that it is an area that our students really struggle with. And when something starts to happen year in, year out, you know it's time to put the thinking cap on to be able to do better. And in fact, my head of department has made the E's in English a core area of focus for us this year. So in undertaking academic writing as an area of interest, I'm drawing upon the work of the EEF and their documentation on implementation theory. So they identify a 4-step process when considering something that we want to work on or develop. These 4 steps are explore, prepare, deliver, and sustain. So because we're at the start of the academic year, I'm currently at the explore stage in thinking about how I can improve the academic writing of my students and of our students across the school. The explore stage is very much focused on identifying a key area you want to work on before beginning to systematically explore it by considering the situation as it stands, the areas of strength and potential weakness, and then considering the possibilities of what can be achieved. So when considering academic writing, I have 3 main questions to start my research off. What are the demands or expectations of students in their academic writing at all levels? What does successful academic writing look like? How can we support our students to become better academic writers? And what strategies do we need to employ? So let's start with question 1 and consider the demands and expectations of students in their academic writing. And I'm going to focus on the EE to begin with. So from the extended essay guide, we know that the extended essay is an independently written research paper that uses transferable skills such as research, critical thinking, and self-management in order to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of theories, tools, and techniques within a specific discipline, whilst exploring a specific research question through the interpretation and evaluation of evidence to help construct reasoned arguments. We can see from this short extracted section from the guide that the demands of the extended essay in terms of academic writing and associated skill sets are great. So this then leads me to ask and consider, well, what does success really look like? And if we look at the top band criteria for the extended essay, we learn that students need to have a clear and coherent knowledge of the discipline so that they are confident and capable enough of formulating a research question that is both focused and clear. They need to then conduct research into this area, research that is appropriate and relevant, formulating arguments and drawing conclusions from the research, which they must also critically evaluate. They need to use sources effectively within an essay and cite them correctly. And when students are writing their piece, their knowledge should draw upon the concepts and subject terminology of the discipline. And that's before we even consider the writing process and some of the mechanics of writing and conventions, such as referencing and bibliographies. Now, of course, the extended essay is the culmination of many, many years of study across a range of disciplines, where the skills just cited have been introduced, versed, practiced, developed, honed, and perfected so that our students can independently approach academic writing with confidence and produce confident essays and confident EEs. But that isn't always the case. And while some of our most able students will be rewarded with their A's, many of our students struggle with approaching such a task in an independent manner and producing the academic standards that are expected of them. Now, unfortunately, there is no extended extended essay subject report for 2022 to help us understand or consider the strengths and limitations of our students or how we can better support them. So instead, I've turned my attention to the subject reports. And the English language and literature subject report is a goldmine of thought around academic writing, identifying 6 core areas of focus: reading, planning, effective introductions, main bodies, effective conclusions, and other considerations. Now, in terms of reading, the subject report asks us to consider whether our pupils are reading widely, whether they can read quickly to comprehend quickly, and whether they can read text closely enough. It's emphasised the need for pupils to plan, but also to practice planning and establish very clearly what plans should look like in the subject area. Similarly, there was specific guidance about what an introduction to an essay should do, but stated quite clearly that clarity within an introduction contributes significantly to an effective structure throughout an essay. Something that I've been hearing more and more about is how effectively students can craft a clear line of inquiry that is followed throughout the entirety of an essay. The report suggests that many candidates struggle with this and have difficulty in structuring an argument in response, as well as difficulty in establishing focused topic sentences. In terms of analysis, the report stated that candidates needed to provide a convincing and well-supported analysis, with many struggling to analyse effects and evaluate how they shape meaning. They stated that frequently candidates wrote entire body paragraphs unlocking one particular technique, which really limited them. Linked to this, it was felt that students needed to develop their criticality and analyse text through a critical lens. The report suggested that candidates' conclusions were weak, with many repetitive and summative comments being made rather than zooming out to make a larger point about the text, and that this needed to be practiced more. And with reference to the mechanics of writing, it was advised that a formal academic register is expected. The report stated that many candidates were aware of the need to use paragraphs but struggled to present them in a coherent order with appropriate transitions. It also argued that the order of the paragraphs should be logical and each body paragraph should build upon the previous paragraph. If students can swap the paragraphs around, then it isn't perhaps as cohesively organised as it should be. Students' vocabulary could be developed, and the examiners saw many errors in technical accuracy, including the basics such as capitalisation of proper nouns. If editing correctly, technical errors would be omitted, more precise language might be used, and word counts might be adhered to. So there is much food for thought with this report, especially when you consider that we would expect students to transfer what is learned within English to support their writing of the extended essay. But it is easy for an English teacher to reflect upon and talk about writing because it is at the heart of everything that we do. Other subjects might not view the importance of academic writing in quite the same way, and yet it features within almost all of the subject reports from this year. So over the course of this week, I've read all the subject reports from the IB, and I've drawn out all of the references to academic writing. And there are many, 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 many references in all their different guises. So I've distilled these down into 9 common areas of focus. And these are knowledge, the question, paragraphing, vocabulary, analysis and evaluation, criticality, conclusions, the editing process, and handwriting. Over the next couple of slides, I'm going to consider some of the feedback that was provided. Now, some of the slides are quite dense, but that is purposefully so to show the breadth of subjects where academic writing is referenced. I'll also ponder some initial questions for you to think over, and I'll raise these up for you to consider. If you'd like the slides post-conference, please just feel free to contact me via my Twitter handle so you can think about this a bit more. So, knowledge. Ensuring students have the required knowledge to be able to write academically is something that crops up in a number of subject reports, with students showing a poor understanding or a superficial understanding in certain subject areas. Furthermore, comments were made about the application of knowledge. So we therefore need to ask ourselves, what is the core knowledge within our subject area? How do we share this with students? For example, I've been using Knowledge Organiser for years with Key Stage 3 and on occasions for Key Stage 4, but rarely with Key Stage 5, which might be a missed opportunity. Do we build in opportunities for retrieval of that knowledge? And do we regularly knowledge test to aid students' memory and retention? One area that the IB advocate is additional wider reading to support the development of knowledge. How do we support students with this in our own subject areas? At Key Stage 4, I have a Padlet, which has all of our topic areas and examples of further reading. This enables pupils to access wider reading at any point. But I haven't done this for Key Stage 5, and I think this would also be a really beneficial tool. Second, the question. The IB identified a number of problems here, understanding questions and the demands of them. They cited that in many subjects, students don't respond to the question and instead throw all of their secure knowledge at a question regardless of the relevance. In addition, it is important for answers, they feel, to continually refer back to the question so that a focus is maintained throughout the piece. Key questions we could be asking ourselves is how often do we share questions with students and model how to closely read a question so that they understand what they're being asked? Do we teach students to carefully identify what a question is looking for, especially those questions that have multiple parts? The IB suggests practicing planning responses to particular questions as well. Seeing excellent questions is key, and helping pupils then to formulate their own research question, the second type of question that frequently appears on the IB programme. Many research questions they felt were descriptive or lacked focus, and it was suggested across the reports that teachers should support students in developing a fully focused research question. Paragraphing was next, with a report suggesting that students find structuring responses a challenge. Supporting students to construct strong paragraphs that are linked to the question is key. Those start with strong topic sentence and build with details and evidence. The IB stated that main body paragraphs must be coherently connected to show that an argument is being sequentially developed. Transitions between paragraphs are key, and these aren't always done very well. This could range from the use of simple discourse markers to echoing and referencing between the last line of one paragraph and the first line of the next. We need to ask ourselves, do we teach our students how to paragraph within our discipline areas? Or do we teach what good structuring looks like or what the layout of a required piece of writing is? In the planning process, when thinking about a response to a question, do we consider the topic sentences first, ensuring that they are focused and relevant? And how successfully do we teach students the transitions between paragraphs to build an argument? Vocabulary was an area where there was a lot of feedback, and it fell into two categories: the accurate use of subject-specific terminology and command words or terms. Students not understanding the command words of a particular subject area and the requirements of these in terms of the length and the quality of response was the most frequent feedback. We therefore need to ask ourselves, are we introducing the command words and demonstrating the purpose of each in terms of the response requirements? And have we identified the relevant terminology in our subject area? How do we teach this terminology? And how do we support students in embedding this vocabulary in their work? Analysis and evaluation and criticality were consistent areas of focus in the subject report. Moderators felt that candidates didn't understand the difference between description, analysis, and evaluation. Therefore, we need to ask ourselves whether our students know what it means to describe, to analyse, and to evaluate. Our head of department recently did this exercise with us as a team, and it produced some really fruitful discussions that can be replicated within class. Are we providing models of each and talking through them? How are we teaching evaluative language? Are we using evaluative sentence stems? Moderators referencing a lot of descriptions and not much evaluation of ideas. Building upon this, criticality in students thinking critically about case studies, texts they'd read, or works that they approach, with many students in some subject areas demonstrating limited evidence of critical thinking. We need to consider what critical thinking looks like in our subject areas and how and potentially when we might introduce this. We also need to consider how we support our students in applying critical thinking to their own work, but also to the work of others. There were lots of comments in the subject reports about ineffective conclusions. Firstly, many references explored what an effective conclusion looked like within a particular subject discipline. What it tends not to be is a summary of arguments or judgments previously made. Some form of evaluation is more desired, or in the case of English, a zooming out. So we need to consider, what does an effective conclusion look like in our subject? Is the construction of a conclusion planned for? Do we model effective conclusions with our students? Are students seeing a conclusion as an integral part of our academic writing or as an add-on? References across the reports were made to editing to check for technical accuracy and that the writing fulfills all the requirements of the course. In proofreading and editing, students should be able to check for careless technical errors such as capitalization and incorrect punctuation usage. They should also be checking for adherence to the word count and concision and phrasing. And finally, ensuring that all components of the academic essay, referencing, for example, are completed properly. We could consider whether students know how to edit or what they should be doing when they are editing. Do we dedicate lesson time to the editing process? Do we provide editing checklists? Do we make use of peer checking? Do students sit and read their work from start to finish before submitting? And finally, the legibility of handwriting came up again and again, and is something that no doubt has been impacted by COVID. How often now are we asking students to handwrite responses? Are we aware of potential handwriting issues in our classes? What support do we put in place? Do we encourage printing or the skipping of lines, for example? There is a lot to consider when it comes to academic writing, and I hope that I've instigated some thought about how you might reflect and think about academic writing in your context. For me, I'm just beginning to look at this area more closely, and I'm excited to work on improving academic writing this year. I want to now review the IGCSE literature in the same way and assimilate what I've learned to then evaluate the teaching of academic writing across our 5-year curriculum plan, to then build a strategic improvement plan to strengthen the support for and the development of academic writing within my own classes and potentially the department across all key stages, before considering the outreach possibilities across the departments in the school to strengthen academic writing everywhere. Thank you for listening, and I hope that that's been interesting and thought-provoking. And I'm going to wait for Dan to return.
Hi, Freya.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. My mind has been blown by how much analysis you've done on what we need to do to or consider when we're talking about teaching students academic writing. It's unbelievable.
It's really interesting in terms of how much it is referenced across all of the subject reports. I mean, obviously, as an English teacher, academic writing is something that is our bread and butter, and we still need to develop it. But to see it across all of the subjects is a really interesting thing. And we've all got a part to play in developing students' academic writing, I think.
So that was going to be my question: is where and when do we start? I mean, I've been teaching the IB myself for over 12 years, and I've never really kind of dug down into this sort of analysis, but I have no chance when the students come to me in IB1, right? So when do we start? Who does this? Is it just an English teacher's responsibility?
I mean, they're amazing questions. So no, it's not just an English teacher's responsibility. I think we start in Key Stage 3, but it's kind of working out that progression again, isn't it? Which is why I want to look at the IGCSE program and see where academic writing is referenced and what the skill sets are there. There are some definite areas of feedback in the subject reports that come up more often than not. Command terms, for example, and understanding explicitly what is expected of you with a particular command term is there all of the time, literally. The response to the question and the focus on the question and staying focused with good paragraphing structure, good topic sentences, and a line of inquiry that flows throughout. That's there quite a lot. Handwriting is a massive issue, and it's a really difficult one to tackle as well. I mean, a number of schools potentially are looking to move their assessments more and more online. The IGCSE are just opening up that as an option and a potential, but really we need to be working on handwriting to ensure that everything is legible.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the NYP, they have some online exams. Would you be therefore in favour of DP exams going online as well, or at least computer-based?
So really, really interesting one, right? I think there are pros and cons because we as a department actually have discussed doing the IGCSE online this year. We've decided against it in the first instance. Writing helps with the processing of thought. And actually, there's a lot of benefits to handwriting a response, but it is something that's going to, I think, become more popular and a deeper consideration for everybody about whether you do move online. And then I guess the question is, like, how often do we as professionals, as adults, now handwrite stuff? Because I don't very often. I use a computer all the time.
I mean, yeah. I mean, when I give scrawled handwriting back on drafts of IAs, I think it's the only time I write. Does that make you sad as an English teacher to lose writing?
Yeah, definitely. As a form of communication, I think, people talk about losing letters, communicating through letters because it's got a different tone and flavor, hasn't it, to an email, if you send someone a quick email. So yeah, I think it's a sad thing. But practically, realistically, in our world, when we're thinking about 21st century learners and all of that,
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a challenge, isn't it? I don't like my handwriting's awful, but I wouldn't want to lose it. I think my students might do. Freya, thank you so much for your talk. I genuinely, my mind has been blown by how much there is to think about, and I'm going to certainly go away and think about my practice and what I.
Well, I need to think about mine.
Oh,
I need to think about mine. I will share the PowerPoint on Twitter, right? I'll share the PowerPoint on Twitter so you can go and think about it a bit more because there's a lot there.
Thank you so much, Freya. You're a superstar as always. Lovely to see you. I'm gonna remove your slides. I'm gonna remove you. Have a lovely afternoon. So, what a wonderful talk to start with from Freya. I mean, that's an amazing amount of analysis there. We're now going to have a short interlude from one of our sponsors. These events wouldn't be possible without their generous support. So we're going to have a quick video from one of our sponsors, which is TLS. And so I'll show that now, and then we're back on with Craig, who's going to be talking to us about the theory of knowledge. The IB theory of knowledge. So I'm just going to show you a video now, and then we'll be back with Craig. Wonderful. Thank you very much to TLS. Their support is very, very much appreciated. Do go and visit their Twitter site, and please do buy some of their stuff as well. So I'm going to bring in Craig to the stream. Hi, Craig. How are you? Can we mute it? You're muted. This is great. The wonders of live streaming. How are you, Craig?
I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Nice to meet you in person. Obviously, we've been kind of virtually in contact. How are you?
Yeah, good. I just had a lovely hike. I'm here in Dubai, and we had a long weekend. And so we went out just maybe an hour and a half outside of the city and had a beautiful hike.
Wonderful. And you're new to Dubai, is that right?
Yes. Just got to Dubai. I was in Shenzhen for the last 3 years.
Okay, and how was that? How was living there, especially through lockdown? That must have been quite challenging.
Yeah, it was tough, but a beautiful place to be for the last 3 years or so.
And would you recommend it to anyone who might be thinking about going abroad?
Yeah, it might be tough to get in at the moment, but yes, generally, yes, absolutely.
Okay, and what are you doing in Dubai now?
I'm the AP coordinator at the American School of Dubai. So I really appreciate this opportunity to reflect upon the IB and the TOK course that I've been teaching for almost a decade.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, I think I've been teaching TOK for a similar amount of time, and I have to admit it's one of the most challenging courses a school can offer. At the same time, it's fantastic and really interesting, and kind of opens up a world of possibilities. How do you feel it lies in terms of challenge and rigor and accessibility for students?
It's simultaneously it is an unreasonable expectation, honestly, to expect high school students to really truly understand epistemology, but I think it's still good that they're asked to do it, right? If you never ask someone to do something they can't do, they never do all that they can, right? Yeah. So even though it's a little bit unrealistic, I think it's good to be stretching students.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I probably couldn't agree more. It's a really tough course. So, I mean, do you want to upload? Do you want to share your screen, share your presentation now? We'll get that uploaded, and then once it's up and running, you're good to go. So hopefully we'll get that up. So just as Craig's going for getting up, for those that don't know, theory of knowledge is, as Craig said, an epistemology course. Essentially, how do you know what you know? And I mean, it's recently changed format a little bit. They're trying to make it a bit more accessible in terms of the assessment. There's now an exhibition and things like that. But it certainly is a really challenging course, and it's one of the core aspects of the IB diploma, and it runs through every single subject. So everyone really is a teacher of TOK to some degree, and that adds a challenge. It also makes it really interesting to teach those subjects because you get to kind of have this theme and this thread running through the knowledge that we're trying to learn and the skills that we're trying to teach. So I'm hoping, there we go. There you go, Craig. I will bow out of the stream and it's over to you.
Thank you. That's the perfect introduction to some of the things I'd like to talk about. Yeah, as we mentioned, I'm happy to be in Dubai and at the American School of Dubai, but I am missing the diploma program because we offer only AP classes. It was interesting to hear you and Freya, Dan, talking about digital exams because we're thinking about some of the same things as we think about AP and advanced placement, which is doing some digital exams this year in the contiguous United States, but not yet internationally. But I am sure that is coming. And I am myself very much a writing person, even though I was a math teacher, so I don't know, and a computer science teacher. That was the first IB course I taught back in Oregon in 2000, maybe just plain 2000, 2001. But yeah, it is a really good thing to reflect on. So a somewhat cheeky title of my slides I thought was Everything I Know About Education I Learned from Teaching TOK, because that's kind of what I wanted to reflect on, was how teaching TOK changed my perspective on what I do in the classroom. And like Dan said, how it can change what everyone does in the classroom. And I'd like to offer a little bit of a reframe on something also. First, though, I just want to, I know that many of you may be experienced DP teachers even, or international teachers, but I know there are always some people in the audience, and there are people considering getting into international education who may not have been as fortunate as I was, for example, to teach the diploma program in a public school in the United States, even before I went abroad. So I just wanted to, offer for the new folks a little more, like what Dan said, what is this TOK? And also, how do you pronounce it? Some people say talk. I just can't get used to that. But like Dan said, it is about, the central question is, how do you know? And the beautiful thing is that applies in every class, although we don't often have time to stop and think about it. And it applies also, then this is kind of the big takeaway I want to get to at the end, it applies to our work in education. And so that's really the big takeaway I want to get to at the end. Like, how has this made me a better teacher? Not just of TOK. I'm not going to get into the subject report, for example, because I'm not teaching it anymore. And so I'm just not as into it, right? And I don't feel like I'm the best person to offer that. But with a little bit of distance, hopefully I can offer a little reframe and some guidance on how to use TOK in your professional growth. So what is it? It's just a course about asking various takes on the question, how do you know? And how do we know, being communities of knowers? And what's so great about it? And again, how it's made me a better teacher. So for one example in this, how do you know, right? And this is just I just pulled the Meta logo to say it's about knowledge as knowledge itself. That's kind of the first big hurdle to get over. It's not about any particular knowledge like we teach in class, like hypothesis testing. It's about knowledge itself and how we know things. And that's the first big thing that I think it takes a mind shift to get into TOK. There was a diagram in the guide with the dotted line, and below the dotted line you were in TOK land when you're thinking about knowledge itself, knowledge as knowledge rather than any particular knowledge. And to offer an example, which is a little bit, hopefully this isn't too inside baseball, too mathematical, but in statistics there's hypothesis testing, right? That is the basis of all sorts of quantitative research. And the way we know, right, when we make claims to know things based on statistics, right? Often what we're saying is we're asking a question, okay, we observed something. What are the chances that that just happened randomly, right? And statistical hypothesis testing gives us a way to answer that mathematically and say, well, it is incredibly unlikely that that would just happen randomly. Therefore, it probably wasn't random. And so that is just one, way of knowing, or one way of answering the question, how do you know, in one area of knowledge. And we all have different ways of answering that in different areas of knowledge, and even within areas of knowledge. In geometry, the answer is a little bit different, for example, and in algebra, even within the area of knowledge of mathematics. So that's just a little bit of a little more dive into what do you mean, how do you know? Like, give me an example. And then I want to expand a little bit on this idea that Dan was talking about, which is really, really crucial. This idea about what we sometimes talk about in the DP as integration, taking this course, TOK, which is near the core of the diploma program, and integrating it into the subjects. And that makes sense, but I actually want to argue that that is backwards. I want to argue for kind of a more grassroots, bottom up way of thinking about TOK. And once subject teachers have just enough understanding of what TOK is, I feel like that's where we can get the most benefit, because I'd like to think I was a decent TOK teacher, but I brought a limited perspective, and I have worked as a part of some great teams, for example, of TOK teachers from business also, or English or physics teachers, or the arts, even if you were lucky enough to pull an arts teacher into your teaching team for TOK. But we still individually only bring little bits. And so ideally, kids are getting little tastes of TOK every day in every class. And so that's, I guess I want to argue for or suggest. I know it's hard with super packed full syllabus and a scheme of work, especially limited instructional time that we all have. But in the math classroom, for example, when I was teaching standard level math, there were certain topics that students in standard level math did not need to know. For example, how to prove that something worked. But I just had this little feeling as a teacher, I couldn't leave it, right? And I just had to say to kids occasionally, you can put your pencil down. This is not something you actually need to know, but it's something that I need you to have seen, right? Because this is a part of what mathematics is, right? And that's maybe a little bit unique to mathematics, which has a divide between school mathematics and mathematics beyond school, but to give them that glimpse of, well, this is what actually professional mathematicians do. This is how we build knowledge and produce knowledge in this discipline, which they might not ever see in a school mathematics classroom otherwise. So I guess I'm just saying, whatever that looks like in your discipline, to give students that little bit of, this isn't in the scheme of work, right? Like, this isn't a bit of the syllabus and a particular assessment objective that you need to know on a test, but appreciating this will help you appreciate this, what is beautiful about this area of knowledge, which is probably a part of why all of us teach it. So this is really the big part, or this section. This how do you know question. Here's a version of it. How do you know that you're a good teacher? I saw someone pose this question on Twitter recently, and it just gave me pause. Like, I like to think I'm good. How do I know, right? And it made me think back to a TED Talk by Daniel Hoffman, a cognitive scientist, who was talking about sense perception and problematizing sense perception. And he gave the example of how the question was, do we see the world as it really is? And the answer was, no, we do not. And he used this example of, unfortunately, my animations aren't working, but hopefully you can see underneath, or maybe you've seen this example of this beetle in Australia who unfortunately does not perceive the world as it is, and perceives these beer bottles, these discarded beer bottles, to be mates, which of course does not work. And it made me think of all these questions which are popping up, hopefully, and you can see them, that are from the new or relatively new syllabus of the TOK course, that are prompts for the IA or the exhibition, which are, and I pulled the ones, there are 35 of them. I pulled the ones that I reflect on most often with respect to my teaching. Like, well, yeah, again, how do I know I'm a good teacher? How do I know that I'm getting better, hopefully, each day? And some of those questions that I reflect on, like, what counts as good evidence? Right? Where am I looking if I'm reading educational research? How do I know the good from the bad? Right? To what extent is certainty even attainable in this discipline that is so human and so influenced by our widely varying contexts across the world, even within national systems? What role do experts play? I think is it Willingham or William? I always confuse the two. Sorry. Who has a book, When to Trust Experts, right? How can we know that our current knowledge is an improvement upon the past knowledge, right? That's a very, like, with all the so many schools being into innovation, in quotation marks, right? How do we know that the new is actually an improvement, right? And what questions about what progress means? What's the relationship between personal experience and knowledge? Right? And what the beautiful one for teachers, what makes a good explanation, right? I like to think I'm good at explaining, but am I? How do I know what makes a good explanation? And so reflecting on these questions professionally is what has probably had a bigger impact on my teaching than any particular, math professional development. I have a degree in mathematics, but continuously reflecting on these sorts of questions, these meta questions about knowledge itself and professional knowledge, craft knowledge, is really probably one of the biggest things I've taken away from teaching TOK. And that has hopefully helped I'm teaching an algebra class right now. Hopefully my algebra students are benefiting from my continued reflection on these questions. And I really like the analogy I chose of a photograph from Dubai, that's the Burj, to architecture. That I think it was also Daniel Willingham offered, because those kinds of reflection questions, like kind of how do you know TOK evidence questions about our profession, are what are like lead you to this analogy that he offers to architecture, right? Like he says, there was an analogy to physics is to architecture as cognitive science is to teaching. And architects, if they want to build a building that stands, especially one of the tallest in the world, right, they have to understand physics. There's an art to it, just like there's an art to teaching, but there's also a science to it. There's material science, for example. There are just physical realities that you have to respect, just that there are cognitive realities that we have to respect. And understanding those different areas of knowledge, domains, the way evidence works differently in them, the way they interact, like that kind of epistemological understanding is probably the biggest takeaway that I've had from teaching TOK and kind of the mind shift. And so, yeah, I guess I just want to encourage everyone to, if you're teaching it, that is awesome. And I look forward to seeing you in the Facebook group. Even though I'm not teaching it anymore, I still just can't help myself contributing. Or on Twitter. But I want to encourage everyone. I think there's sometimes a perception of TOK as beyond or too abstract. And in the same way that as a math teacher, you get that when you're at a party, you want to tell people you do anything else because people inevitably you get, I hated math or whatever. And I'm not a math person. Everyone's a math person. If you are doing math, you are a math person. Just like everyone is a TOK person. If you are thinking about those sorts of questions, those reflection questions, you are a TOK person. And the world could benefit and your school could benefit and TOK could benefit from you being in that classroom. If you are in, it doesn't matter what you teach. That is the beauty of the course. And I really hope that schools can get even more art teachers, for example, into the TOK classroom, because people have so much to offer. And so I guess I just hope that this presentation might entice some people into TOK that might before have thought like, oh, I'm not really a TOK person. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope it hasn't been too big picture for you. I appreciated in the last one all the detail, but I just took a different tack.
No, Craig, thank you so much for talking. I mean, it is bigger picture certainly, but something that I think affects us all as teachers. Your question of how do I know I'm a good teacher? I mean, I've never pondered that before, but actually, that's a really, really deep question to ask teachers. I mean, do you think teaching TOK should be kind of not a mandatory part, but should be kind of strongly encouraged for all teachers?
Yeah, I'd love more people doing it. And I know some schools have different ways of organizing it where subject teachers do come in and work with a particular area of knowledge, which can be, I've not experienced that model, but that can be a great way to get more people involved. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, you obviously said you're not a math teacher, you're a TOK teacher. Do you think that actually that kind of refreshing outlook changes the way in which you approach your maths teaching? Instead of saying, right, this is the math I need to teach, this is the way in which we address knowledge as a mathematician? And do you think that influences the way you structure your tasks?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it gave me something to hold on to when we all knew, like, even when I was a very new teacher and I knew, like, there has to be something more. I'm not just teaching kids linear equations, right? Like, that doesn't seem a worthy life goal. But so what am I teaching them? And yeah, it is ways of knowing, ideally, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, ways to appreciate and understand themselves, because some of us enjoy different ways of knowing or have more natural affinities for different ways of knowing or producing knowledge or interacting with knowledge, and appreciating that and being able to admit that yeah, absolutely has informed my math teaching, and to be able to say to kids, like, you don't have to love it, right? Like, this is a particular way of knowing, and yeah, if it's not your bag, that's okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Craig. Wonderful presentation, massive big picture, but actually I think really challenging, especially for IB teachers to think about those things. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to say hello to you and to meet you in person. And yeah, have a lovely sunny afternoon in Dubai.
Thank you again for the invitation and the
See you
opportunity.
later.
Bye.
Bye. The wonderful TOK talk from Craig there. It's an absolute minefield sometimes, but I think that perspective can really help teachers. So next up we have Amy. I'm going to add Amy into the stream. There we go. Hi, Amy.
I was crossing my fingers there that it was going to work.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's going to work. So, Amy, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're currently doing, a bit of your background before we get you going? I know you've got a short time window to speak, but I think it'd be nice to hear a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I was just working out how to share screen and things, so I'll have a play around with that in a minute. But yeah, I'm Amy. I've been teaching now for, I think this is my 13th year, but I've only worked in a boarding school, an international school, for the last 2 years. So it's a bit of a shift, a bit of a change, and I'm going to talk today about how being a teacher and being a form tutor and being a boarding tutor has all kind of intersected to help me understand more about student wellbeing.
Wonderful. I mean, student wellbeing is at the forefront of, I think, pretty much every teacher's mind, explicitly or not. And I think it's something that we all need to be aware of. And I guess in that boarding environment, it's kind of more so, right? You're the parents, locus parentis, literally exactly. Looking after these kids all day, every day. And how does that change your outlook compared to a normal non-boarding teacher?
I think it's an interesting one because you kind of end up wearing a few different hats. So when you are in boarding and you're in their home and you're kind of sometimes, parent, kind of auntie, sister, older. Some of them, especially, when they're sort of in the upper school, there's probably about 15 years between us, but it's just a very different relationship to obviously how like the younger students see you. I'm probably the same age as their mum, and it's a very different relationship. So I think you end up wearing quite a few hats, and then they come to your English class and it's a different kind of persona again. And seeing that can help, and they know when to come to you for certain things. And it's challenging sometimes, but amazingly rewarding, definitely.
Wonderful. So whilst you try and get your slides to share, hopefully you can do that now. Just a reminder to everybody that we're sponsored today by Pupil Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. Their support obviously makes this whole thing possible, and having free Teachmeets is obviously wonderful in terms of CPD for everybody. So a huge thank you to Pupil Progress and to Teachers Love Stationery. I can see that your slides are there. I'm going to put them up. There you go.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Wonderful.
So how do I skip between them?
I think I now I can see a different screen to you, so I'm assuming you click somewhere. Can you click
let's
somewhere?
have a look. Let me have a quick play around before I start. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, great.
There we go. Wonderful. I'm going to get out then, and I'll leave you to it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dan. Okay, so as I was just saying in my kind of brief introduction with Dan, my name's Amy, and I am an English teacher, a sixth form tutor, a boarding tutor, and I've been teaching for about a decade. So I'm going to talk today about supporting student wellbeing and really what I've learned from working in a boarding school over the last 2 years or so. So the first thing, I suppose, that is really important is laying the foundations. So when students arrive, often they have never visited the school. They've seen things online. They have maybe spoken to current boarders on Zoom calls to get an idea of what it's like being at school here, what the different subjects are like, but they may never have actually stepped physically in the building. So it's kind of setting the tone and making sure that everybody's happy right from day one. And we have boarding tutors on hand to help unpack, carry suitcases up the 3 or 4 flights of stairs that the boarding house is up. And we have our prefect team, so I'll talk a bit more about that in a few moments. But really is just, integration in the first term. Students can be a little bit wobbly at times, and actually being there for them and making them feel comfortable. So about 25% of our student population are boarders. It increases kind of as the students get older. We don't have very many boarding in kind of the equivalent year 7, but in years 12 and 13, it's about 50% of the year groups there are boarders. So it's extremely important, obviously, that we support them and make sure that they're thriving. So what do we do? So we have trips. We have what the students like to call compulsory fun every Wednesday afternoon, and making sure that they're kind of coming out of their rooms, integrating with one another, getting to know each other. Sometimes we've got over about 20 different nationalities, and you will find that obviously students that are from Germany will try and find the other German students and speak German to them, but we have a kind of English only rule when there's anybody else within earshot, so to make sure that people are not feeling left out. We have quite clear routines, so every day they finish school and there is a set structure of activities, and that can really help because we have time to regroup. So in the same way that as a parent I might sit down and say, what did you do at school, let's have a cup of tea and a biscuit type thing, and it's just the same, but we're all together as a house, so having those daily meetings, time to give notices, regroup and check in on how their day's been. And that would be the tutor team, but also the prefects. So we have 6th form prefects that are in-house. We have a head of house, a senior prefect, and then a few other prefects, depending on how big the house is, will depend on how many we need. And they're really carefully chosen. They've got peer mentor training, and they are invaluable in terms of support for the boarders. So yeah, as a tutor, I really rate them and rely on them to give me information, to have a little word with people, and then just be a really vibrant part of the house, and they are brilliant. And they lead house activities. So I mentioned the compulsory fun, so the tutors will be involved with that as well. But we have things like house drama, house music, and they put on full productions. So that takes a lot of kind of getting people out of their shell, making sure that they're getting involved with new activities and really finding their feet here. And by the first half term, pretty much everyone is settled. We finish next week. And some of them are looking forward to going home and seeing family, but obviously really not looking forward to leaving behind their new best friends that they've spent the last 6 weeks with. One of the things I mentioned is that we have over about 20 different nationalities, and we follow the IB curriculum and we follow IGCSEs. But some students have never, they might have not done IGCSEs, they might have done something completely different and are coming to the IB, or maybe they're joining us for IGCSEs and they've not studied some of these topics in the same way. So just making sure that academic well-being is taken into account. So we have extra classes for students who have English as an additional language, and they're tiered, making sure that everybody's getting what they need. But also we have peer support. So making sure that if you haven't studied biology to this level before, this person has, and we kind of buddy them up and make sure that people are matched up, and offering tutoring to upper school, offering it to the lower school. And we have quite a strict prep time. So we have 2 hours, between, depending on the age group, but yeah, up to about 2.5 hours of prep time. And there's really no grey area. We have access to a few libraries across the school. And it means that you have that focus time. You can ask questions to the tutor. It's an opportunity to use the resources that are in the school as well, so there's no distractions. And it means that then they can enjoy that kind of compulsory fun and all the activities that we put on in the later evening. In terms of day-to-day, I think that there's 2 parts for me that are super important. So I've mentioned the sort of after-school routines, but having that consistency, we have quite a big tutor team. It's a different tutor on duty every day. We have the daily presence of the house mothers, and we have the house master and the house mistress. But actually, making sure that those tutors are kind of doing the same sorts of things. We have that consistency. They know that on a Monday the same things will happen than on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we keep really regular logs. So we have a logbook every day that we would fill out as a tutor. And it means that when I go on duty, I can see what's been happening with particular students over the course of that long term, and be able to check in with them and see how they're doing, if that's relevant, or just notice it. We don't always need to be commenting on things, but it's just something to keep at the back of our mind, how we can help support that student. So the routines are the same every day, and we have really set activities and kind of set things that we have to do. The cruel thing of taking the mobile phones off certain students at certain times of the evening and things like that, that's consistent. But we also are able as a tutor to kind of bring our own ideas into house. So different tutors will run different activities based on their skills. We have yoga, basketball, volleyball, but we also have things like making waffles or giant Lego structures. And it's about finding your niche, I suppose, within a consistent system. And that long-term support is really important. And I think it's something that I've learned from tutors that have been in the team for about, I think the oldest serving person is over 20 years. And, they have seen things change, but they've seen how things stay the same. So as I said, we're going towards week 7. We've got students that are really looking forward to going home. And we know that on week 3, that's where we often have that slump. And so it's things like that year on year, and talking to other tutors about, what is the same, what do we see every year? We see that the shine kind of, rubs off a little bit. They've got that excitement in the first week. They've got the sort of daunting, lots of homework, lots of different lessons and things in the second week. And then by the week 3, they're kind of, slumping. And so what can we do to support them? A simple thing, we have like hot chocolate evenings and things like that, just to get everyone together and just being that, like Dan said before, that home from home for them. So in terms of how it's different, I suppose for me, it's been very different to be seeing students in their own homes. Schools that I've worked at before have been very rigid in terms of, your school persona, and, I wouldn't have seen any of the students outside of school. So actually I feel more part of the community by being involved in the boarding team. But that's kind of it from me, but I really would love to answer any more questions, anything that you would like to know about working in a boarding school, and how we really sort of support those students to thrive, because I think, they do fantastically here, and it's an amazing environment to work in. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amy. I mean, I suppose the question that rings to me, and we kind of touched on it a little bit at the beginning, is how do you draw that balance between being the parent aspect and being the teacher aspect and being the kind of I suppose the pastoral team aspect? Because obviously there's 3 or more hats you're wearing, and you know, disciplining, supporting, challenging, you know, and then academically, I mean, all those things merge into one. How do you draw the line yourself? How do you make sure the students know where that line is, and or do you not need to bother?
I think potentially it's a role that suits my kind of teacher persona, in terms of being quite firm, but also very loving in the way I'm, you know, talking to them and being, you know, caring as a human being, but obviously, like, you know, making sure that they know that I want the best for them. I'm not telling them off for the sake of it. It's very clear that this is going to help them in one way or another. I think also we've got house mothers, so if it's things that are, you know, like tidying your room and things like that, yes, I might mention it if I walk in to their room and it's a bit, you know, a bit of a state, but actually the house mother will be there to do that. So it's sort of, there's lots of different tiers, and I suppose if I had an issue, if I had a problem, then I might kind of speak to the house mother if it was a more maintenance issue, or if it was a real concern, then obviously in the same way as if I was a classroom teacher, there's those protocols that you follow in terms of safeguarding, and you've got the house mistress or the senior leadership team as well to support. So I think it's knowing what is appropriate for you to get involved with as a tutor and what is somebody else's role and responsibility as well.
Wonderful. And I suppose last question, I know if you've got time before you go, you've got time. Last question is, how do you deal with the, obviously as a boarding school or boarding house, you have different cultures and students from many different backgrounds, right? How do you balance those, kind of being respectful to people's cultures and traditions and customs, at the same time kind of holding whatever your school's ethos and values is together, and kind of, but this is now outside of the classroom. So the classroom, I think most schools kind of have systems to deal with making sure we treat people, you know, inclusively, etc. But you're talking about their lives now out of school. How do you merge that, balance that, kind of, and be respectful to everybody?
I think it's that, like you say, that ethos, like our sort of school, like part of our school motto is this like international outlook. And I think we stress that is a really important part of our school, and what makes it unique is having all of those different nationalities come together. I mean, on a practical level, we do celebrate lots of different festivals. We have, you know, different themed foods in the school canteen, and you know, and the students help organise that. So if there's a particular event on, they will work with the catering staff and say, you know, we'd really like this, and create the menu with them and giving them the ownership of what sort of things they want to celebrate. And I think food is quite often, from my perspective anyway, a big part of our culture and a big part of our celebrations. So seeing, you know, how we're inclusive in that sense, but also that, you know, I think everybody is very supportive. You know, there's not been any kind of major clashes or anything since I've been here. And I think that kind of stems from everybody as an individual. We're all part of this together. But you might have your different beliefs and different ideas, and all are welcome, really.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Been a whistle-stop tour, but wonderfully insightful. Thank you so much for your time. I realised we had a bit of back and forth at the beginning in terms of how it was going to work.
I'm not
wonderfully
super with the technology, so this is the first time I've done this live stream thing. So thank you for talking. Thank you, Dan, for talking me through everything. And
all good. You're a star. You're an absolute superstar. So have a lovely Saturday. Enjoy whatever activity you have today. See you later.
Bye for now.
Bye. So wonderful. A slightly different take there in terms of the international community, and having many different students from different environments, different cultures in a boarding house. So thank you very much to Amy for her input. We now have Brett. Hi, Brett. Brett's from Pupil Progress. Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Very well. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you absolutely fine. Therefore, I assume everybody else can too. Yeah, how's it all going today?
Yeah, it's been okay. A sincere apology. We should have been on earlier, but the whole of our apartment block, we're just outside London. There's the internet went down, and then I've just managed to get it back up. So we are, yeah.
Well, you're here. Yeah. You're here. Better late than never. Obviously, thank you so much, Pupil Progress, for the support that you give us. I'm going to bow out and let you go for a bit.
Perfect. I mean, just to give you a bit of a snapshot, we sponsor the Teachmeet Icons event because it's just such an incredible way to support teachers with free CPD. We were actually sponsoring right from the start, from history all the way through. I'm going to share screen just to show you actually a little bit about what we do, because we've got a number of international schools that use us. We've got about 7 schools in the UAE and 2 in China, 1 in actually Shanghai and in Thailand. So anyone that's listening internationally, we cover international education qualifications as well. And I'm going to share screen and actually show you what it is we actually do. Now, hopefully, perfect. What we actually have done is, and I'm going to be really specific because I've only got, 4 or 5 minutes or so, which is to talk about taking the pain point away of Excel and Google spreadsheets. What we've actually created is trackers that replicate the exam board exactly. So if you're teaching an English examination, or you're teaching IGCSE, or you're teaching an international qualification, we have built the trackers that replicate the exam board exactly. You can add your own tests. You can adjust the grade boundaries. What you're looking at here is an example of English EdXL, choosing the very latest grade boundaries from the very latest exam series, and the ability to pull up a report. Now, this is something that really changed the game for our company, is that, and why it exists. It's about impact in the classroom. It's about impact on your work life. It's impact on your ability to do the things you need, but to do them faster. That's the whole point of software. This individual report is empowering students. It is creating an environment where they feel really motivated. If you can see here, you can see the topic areas they're struggling with. You can see how they're performing in each exam. It gives students the confidence to see why you're teaching what you're teaching. And also, parent consultation evenings. Parents are just so excited to see this level of detail. Parents' consultation evenings are also far more efficient, and they're also, more impactful in terms of the information being presented sits with the parents so easily because it's just so well organized. Again, direct impact on teaching and learning. And it's something that I felt when I was teaching, and I used this system before I stopped to actually start pupil progress, helped me feel more in control. And I'll give you an example here. We are actually enabling you to run assessments, tag questions against specific topic areas. This is being tagged against AO5 and allowing you to see how students are performing at topic summary level, at AO summary level, so that you're not just calculating grades, you're actually seeing the impact on what they need to know in order to move forward. Specific example here, we've got a target grid. If a student has a minimum target grade of maybe a 5, or it might be an A or a B or a C, this student currently with a minimum target grade of a 5, currently working at a grade 2 and an average grade of a 4, to get that 5 needs 42 marks. So this system is going to show you not only how many marks they are away, it's also going to literally highlight exactly where they're going to get that uplift from, because I can see I'm 42 marks away. I can see which AOs or topic areas are going badly. I can see which AO that relates to within that specific assessment. And guess what? I'm going to go and teach. So again, it provides that complete clarity and laser focus on what is our classroom activity. I'm very aware these conversations go very quickly. So I'm sure time is kind of racing away from me. So I'll cover this very briefly. Analytically, it's also doing all of the subgroup analysis that you need. It is allowing you to filter the trackers. So if you're having raising attainment progress meetings, or you want to look at specific subgroups, our trackers can do that. We're calling it actionable data. And on top of which, you've also got the ability to see, overall summary headlines for whole department performance. That is, again, all consistent and done for you, right? So other things, as a whole school, we're just about to bring on our first whole school in the UAE. This pulls through every grade from every subject area, telling you how they're performing against each one of their minimum target grades. So at a whole school level, we're working with a number of trusts in the UK, and we're in roughly 250 schools nationwide, as well as the schools that are international as well. if you want to try this, if you are an international pixel school, what's really exciting is you've got the ability to use 2 subject areas at 0 cost. You've also got the ability to trial this. Okay, so you can trial it for absolutely free, 0 cost for at least 4 weeks, and you can get classes set up immediately. What you're looking at here is the chat function, which will allow your staff to get instant support on how to set it up and how to get it up and running quickly. If you want to actually, move forward with subscription, we have a per department subscription model. Okay, so it doesn't have to be bought at a whole school level. That's the important thing. It's not one of your essential systems that has to be purchased either across the trust or as a single academy. So you can get it for a single subject area. Do use the QR code that is on the screen now, or just email me at brett@pupilprogress.com. If you really like what you see, if you're having problems with spreadsheets and Google Sheets and you hate it like I did, get yourself on email me, and I'll make sure someone in my team, if not me personally, gets your trial up and running. I didn't time myself, Dan, so I'm hoping I did stay within some kind of parameter.
All good, yeah, all good. No worries. Within the 5 minutes, it's not a problem. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for your continued support as well. And it's great that you can, support the international market too. And I'm sure there are many people out there that struggle with Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets, etc.
Do you know what? It's as simple as that. I'm not going to waffle on. Software is designed to help you do all the things that you need. Software, we're not reinventing the wheel. We didn't create QLA. We didn't create the term tracking, but we're just harnessing software to do all the things you need faster and more easily to impact on your workload. Simple.
Wonderful. Couldn't ask for anything more, could we? Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brett. Have a lovely Saturday. Hope the building works go okay. And we'll see you
I'm hoping the internet stays up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's key. See you later.
Nice one. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So wonderful. Thanks to our sponsors there, Pupil Progress, and also to Teachers Love Stationery, who also support us, and we'll be seeing more from them later. So next up, we have Andrew. I'm going to add Andrew to the stream. Hi, Andrew. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, very well. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Good.
I'm doing a sunny day in Madrid. It's a good 25 degrees today.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, lovely. I think you'll be speaking to a lot of people who are pretty envious of that. Love a bit of 25 degrees.
Yeah, until the end of October, it's more or less summer in Madrid, and then it just changes to autumn like that.
Wow. Okay. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you're doing now, just so that everyone knows a bit about you?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I live in Madrid. I live here because my wife is Spanish, and I moved here about 10 years ago. I've been a teacher for 10 years. I did my PGC about 10 years ago. Did my NQT year in the UK as a primary teacher. Then came here to Madrid and got a job as a primary teacher. I've been working in the same school ever since. But about 3 years ago, my school opened the DP for the first time. And as I studied psychology, I took on the role of the psychology teacher in DP. And that's the role that I'm going to be presenting in today.
Wow. I mean, there can't be many people that teach primary and diploma.
Probably not.
Are there more at your school, or are you the only one?
That's a good question. Yeah, definitely the only one who teaches primary and diploma. We have other teachers who teach second and diploma, but definitely primary and diploma. I'm the only one. Yeah.
There can't be many of you in the world. Would be my guess. Scares the living daylights out of me thinking teaching in a primary school. You are an absolute star for doing that, stretching yourself. Two very different approaches. How do you find it? Like, is it easy to switch between the two?
I don't find it too bad. No, I always wanted to be a primary teacher, so I never anticipated teaching psychology because my school didn't have a sixth form or an equivalent of sixth form when I joined it. But I really enjoy both the challenges of both. I really enjoy working with younger children. I've worked with 5-year-olds as well. I taught 5-year-olds for 4 years.
Wow.
But I love all aspects of teaching. It's true. So it's nice to work with the older students and to teach something that is more academically challenging. I always hesitate to say something like that, because nothing's harder than teaching a 5-year-old how to read.
I was going to say.
but it's really nice working with grade 5. There's children are age 10 and 11, and I love working with that age kids as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Sounds fantastic. So do you want to try and start sharing your slides whilst we get started? So yeah, really looking forward to your talk. It's going to be about the fact that we're all teachers of language, right? So
exactly, yes.
That's really important in an international school.
Let me ask you, what should I choose? What's better for me to use, share screen or slides?
Entirely up to you, whatever you'd like to do. I think it'll work both ways. So yeah, I mean, working in an international school myself, I know that we have multiple languages, not just the. I mean, I work in Germany. We have German speakers, obviously. English is the kind of language of everyone, but we have 50 nationalities, and I imagine that's quite similar in many schools. And so I hope today, we can have a little bit of an insight into how we can support our teachers, kind of being able to teach those English language skills, or because actually it is relevant for absolutely everyone, and to be honest, probably quite relevant for people not in an international school as well. The world is becoming more globalized, and that brings with it some opportunities. So hopefully this talk is going to be really relevant to lots of people out there, and I'm sure we'll get a good response from it.
I hope so. Can you see my slides at the minute?
I can't. I don't think they're uploaded into the.
They're not. No. Okay. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to cover me for a minute or two more. I'm sorry.
Do you want to try share screen?
If I share, yeah, I'm using Firefox though, and it says that Firefox isn't supported if I share screen.
Okay, I might have to cover you for a little bit. Okay, this is going to be fun, isn't it? Do you know what? We'll use this opportunity to have a little message from one of our sponsors. In that case, sure. we've got a video from Teachers Love Stationery, which I will get ready and get that going. And so whilst I'll take you out. Oh no, hang on. I'm going to play this over the top of you. I'm going to mute you, Andrew, and then so this will play over the top of you, I believe. So hopefully all is good. You've got a minute or so. And here's a message from one of our other sponsors. We've just heard Brett from Pupil Progress, and here is another video from Teachers Love Stationery. Wonderful. How are we doing, Andrew? Are we back in?
I am trying to.
I can see it. There you go. I put it up for you. There you go.
Okay, right. So wonderful. I am ready to go. If you're ready for me to go,
I will leave the screen, and the screen is all.
Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, so as Dan said, I'm going to be talking about how I promote literacy in IB psychology. The idea that we're all teachers of language is, I guess, something that many of us have heard before. And in the last couple of years that I've been teaching IB psychology, I've been trying to explore what that might mean in my own practice. So as I've said, I've been an IB psychology teacher for 2 years, but I'm also currently a grade 5 primary teacher, as I was saying to Dan earlier. And I'm also very much a lover of books and language. I think in an alternative universe, I might have been an English teacher. That's something that is really my favorite part of teaching in primary, teaching reading and writing and sharing books with my students. And it's something that I've brought to my teaching of psychology as well. So I'm going to talk about 3 different things that I do in my psychology classes. One is encouraging my students to read around psychology. And really providing access to the books that we have in our school library for those students. The second thing is explicitly teaching Tier 2 and Tier 3 vocabulary and why I think that's important. And then finally, grammar for writing. So DP psychology is a very well, certainly the assessments, the exams that the students do at the end of the 2 years is very writing heavy. They have to write a lot. And so I'm really trying to teach them how they can use grammar to express themselves clearly, to express themselves elegantly, and maximize maximize the marks that they get on their exams, for one thing, but also that being able to write well is just an end in itself. So this is a photograph of the psychology section of our school library, well, one of the shelves anyway. And when I started teaching a couple of years ago, this was a real godsend to me, because the school had invested quite a bit in a number of books for the students, primarily, of course. But it'd been a long time since I'd graduated, and so I needed to go back and work on my subject knowledge a little bit. And there were things in the DP psychology curriculum that I simply hadn't learned in my degree, so I had to go and do quite a bit of reading myself. And this book that you can see here, Patient HM by Luke Dittrich, was one of the books that one of the first books that I read. Anyone who's studied psychology at any level will be familiar with HM. He is probably the most famous case study certainly in 20th century psychology. To just very briefly tell you his story. When he was a young boy, he was involved in a traffic accident, and he developed severe epilepsy subsequently. He received various kinds of treatments, nothing really worked. And so at the age of 27, he agreed to undergo a radical lobotomy. He had large sections of his temporal lobes removed. And it worked. It's really treated his epilepsy very well. But it had a very unexpected side effect, which was that from that day onwards, he was more or less unable to form any new long-term memories, which meant that from the age of 27 until he died, I think he was 82, he was certainly in his 80s when he died, every single day was a new day for him. Every single day, rather, was, he couldn't remember what the previous day had been like. So he'd look at himself in the mirror and not understand why he was aging. Absolutely horrendous situation for someone to be in. From another point of view, a fascinating case study for psychologists to look at. And so much of what we know about memory is thanks to particularly this one individual. So this book really enlightens a lot of what we learn about memory from the study of someone like HM. It's directly relevant to the content that the students need to learn in DP psychology. Research methods in psychology is also something that is a really important topic, and we learn a lot about case studies, which is a particular type of research method in psychology, from this study. So as I read this book, I thought, yeah, my students need to read this book. And so I take my students up to the secondary library during class time, and I say, here are the psychology books. When we get to the memories section of the curriculum, I take this book into class and I say to them, here's the book that you need to read. The librarian will happily lend it to you. But still, the students don't tend to read the books. And I realized after a while that the reason for that is not necessarily because they don't know where the book is or they don't realize it's useful to them, but it's a daunting prospect to read this book. All of the students that we teach are speakers of English as a second language. This book it's fascinating. It's directly relevant to what they need to learn, but it's quite intimidating as well. And so what I realized that I needed to do was to facilitate access to the book. And so what I created was this guide, which selected chapters or sections of the book that I knew the students would benefit from. And so what I do is I create this document, I stick a QR code inside the cover of the book. So when the student takes the book out, they scan the QR code and they can see which sections they should read, or I just give them the PDF. Well, it works. One of my DP2 students is reading this book at the minute. And she said to me this week, I asked her how she was getting on with it. And she said, oh yeah, it's really interesting. It's quite difficult, but it's really interesting. And well, of course it is. I mean, it's written for native speakers. It's quite a long book. But I don't think she would have ever picked it up had I not been able to present it to her in this way. Here are a couple of other books that I've done the same thing with. In both cases, these are fascinating books in their own right, directly relevant to the kind of content that the students have to learn for DP psychology. and extremely intimidating for I would say the average person, the average native English speaker to pick up and read, let alone 16 and 17-year-olds for whom English is a second language. So I've prepared study guides for both of these books, and little by little, I'm trying to build up that a library of these study guides, and it is working. The students are starting to take these books out. So I had to think about what this might look like in other subjects. And about a week ago, I tweeted out this tweet and tagged in the most prominent science teachers that I know of. And these were some of the results that I got. And as I was reviewing my presentation last night, I realized that actually I have one of these books on my own shelf. This one, the Greatest Show on Earth. And so I opened it pretty much at random and last night, and I was presented with this. Hopefully you can see this beautiful picture of a 47 million year old fossil, beautifully preserved, called Darwinius massilae, which in this caption, Richard Dawkins is explaining how this is not a missing link, which is how it's been reported. But I just realized as I looked at this is the kind of thing that I would have appreciated having access to when I was a GCSE or an A-level or MYP or DP biology student. So I think it's a really useful activity for teachers of any subject is to think about, what are the essential books from my discipline that we should have on our library shelves? What do our students deserve to have access to? But then the next step is, how am I going to facilitate the access to that? Because any of the books that are on the screen or any of the books that I've just talked about, they are not necessarily easy books, particularly not for our students that we're looking at, especially not for international students. And so it's not good enough just to have the book there or to take it into the classroom and say, you need to read this book. We need to take another step. Okay, so that's reading. The second thing that I want to talk about is the specific teaching of vocabulary, and specifically tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary. I'm sure if you're watching this, I'm sure you're familiar with this concept of tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary. I will just very briefly go over it now. According to Beck and McEwen, we can classify language into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the everyday language that children arrive at school already being familiar with and doesn't really need to be taught. Tier 2 language is the less common language that we often have concepts for, but not necessarily knowledge of these particular words. And so this is language that does need to be taught, and it's language that perhaps is more commonly used in written language than spoken language, but we can use it across multiple academic domains. And tier 3 language is the academic language that's specific to particular disciplines. Now, of course, any subject that we teach at DP is going to have its own tier 3 lexicon. And psychology is certainly no exception to that. But what I've become interested in is the importance of teaching tier 2 language in psychology lessons. Because, again, because our students are all international students, we just can't take for granted that they've got this tier 2 language in the same way that we can't take it for granted with native students either. So I'm just going to talk for a little bit about how I do that. Here's a video that we watched in one of our DP1 psychology lessons recently about debunking psychology myths. One of the myths that the speaker talks about is the idea that we only use 10% of our brain, which is completely false. And he said that even when we're doing the most mundane of tasks, brain scanning studies have shown that all various different parts of the brain are communicating with each other and are being activated. And as I was watching that video, I knew that my students wouldn't know, or most of them were unlikely to know what mundane meant. Mundane being a tier 2 word. So I thought, well, this is something I need to teach them. So I was able to give them the definition before we watched the video. After watching the video, I went back to the way that it was used by the speaker. And that was that for that lesson. But again, I knew that they wouldn't remember that word for the probably beyond that lesson. So in a subsequent lesson, I use this pretty standard retrieval practice starter in which the students need to retrieve knowledge from a previous lesson a week earlier and further back. And whilst the second and third questions are definitely psychology questions, the first question is not a psychology question. It's simply, can you remember what this word means? And there's two reasons for that. One is that it's, mundane is a word that belongs in the lexicon of any educated person. So in itself, it's worth knowing. However, by coincidence, there is a psychological concept called mundane realism, the definition of which you can see there. And students need to know what that means, and they need to be able to apply that concept to the studies that they learn about. So I know that because my students know the meaning of the word mundane, that's just going to make it a little easier for them to grasp the concept of mundane realism when it comes around in the course in a few weeks' time. So again, it's worth looking at the kind of tier 2 vocabulary that is going to come up in whatever books, whatever videos or resources that we're using with our students in any subject, and making a decision. Is this the kind of word that our students should know? Do they deserve to know what this word is? Does it have any links to the tier 3 vocabulary that pertains to my subject? So that's just one example of how I'm trying to teach tier 2 vocabulary. Here's an example of a mock exam question that one of my students has done. And I've just highlighted the fact that she's been able to use the word exemplify, which is a tier 2 word. So this question, the students had to answer. The question is, evaluate the use of a research method using a particular study. So she's using the study that was done by a psychologist called Becker. And as I explained to them before they started answering the question, your focus here is on the research method. Okay, you've got to use the study as an example of that research method. And so whatever strength or limitation that you're going to talk about of the research method, that is reflected in the study that you've chosen, because this study uses that particular research method. In other words, this study exemplifies whatever the strength or the limitation is. So try and use that word. And that is all that it took for the students to be able to use that word. Introduce the word to them, explain the definition of what it means, how it pertains to the task that they're about to do, and then the student was able to use it accurately in their study, in their answer. Excuse me. So tier 2 vocabulary, I think, really is worth implementing in our subjects, whether we're English teachers or not. Obviously, English teachers are doing this all the time. I appreciate that. As for tier 3 language, well, psychology is full of it, like every other DP subject. Here are some examples. These are all concepts that relate to the experimental method in psychology, and they all have to be taught explicitly. So how can you do that? Well, I've tried to take a leaf out of Alex Quigley's book. He's talked a lot about the explicit teaching of vocabulary, and a lot about tier 1, 2, and 3 words. Exogenous is a tier 3 word that belongs in psychology and maybe biology as well. And by looking at the morphological structure of the word, the root, the prefix, and the suffix, what we can do is raise the word consciousness, as Alex Quigley calls it, of our students. So we can teach them that exo means outside or external, and then we can provide plenty of tier 1 and tier 2 words using that prefix that the students will be familiar with. Genus, again, will be more tier 2 and tier 3 words, but we can choose words that we can be confident that our students are going to know. And then when we give them the definitions of these parts of the words and put it together, my experience is that it allows the students to learn and remember the meaning of the words more quickly, and then to start using it in their work. So I told my students what exogenous means in the context of neurotransmitters and the molecules that can have the same effect as a neurotransmitter, and molecules that can block the effect of a neurotransmitter, which can be either endogenous, produced in the body, or exogenous, produced outside of the body. That's a load of vocabulary there that I just threw out in 30 seconds. And it's very intimidating for the students when they have to learn this amount of vocabulary. But breaking it down and looking at it morphologically in this way is really helpful. I really recommend Alex Quigley's website. I've got a link, a reference to it at the end of the presentation, which I'll post on Twitter afterwards. But if you're interested in doing this, he's got a lot of really useful material on his website that I strongly recommend. Okay, so finally, I'm going to talk about grammar for writing and how I'm trying to implement that in DP psychology. So The Writing Revolution is absolutely an amazing book that I would recommend to any teacher that needs to teach writing at any level, in any key stage or any section of school. I've been using it in my primary practice for a couple of years now, and I've really seen the power of explicitly teaching sentence structure and explicitly teaching grammatical constructions to my younger pupils. And I've started to do it with my DP psychology students recently as well. Two of the structures that I've been teaching to them have been pretty well publicized by the Writing Revolution. Well, certainly one of them anyway is appositives. So that's a noun or a noun phrase that refers to another noun or noun phrase and is placed next to it in a sentence. And defining and non-defining relative clauses. Why are these so useful in DP psychology? Well, because of the volume of Tier 3 vocabulary that the students have to learn and have to use in their exam questions. One thing that they are actively assessed on by the markers is whether they use the vocabulary accurately. Freya talked about this in her talk at the start of the session. How in the subject reports, sometimes the examiners are noticing that in many subjects, students aren't using specialist vocabulary accurately, and so they've really got to show the examiner that if they use a term like the ones that I just showed a minute ago, like internal validity, they have to show the examiner that they know what that means. And using a well-placed appositive or a well-placed or well-chosen relative clause can do that. Let me go back to this example that I showed a minute ago. Although I was delighted to see this student using the word exemplify, in the next couple of sentences, she talks about how the study was a natural experiment. That's the type of experiment that psychologists do. And then she defines that in the subsequent sentence by saying, this means that blah, 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 blah. And she correctly identifies what a natural experiment is, and that's great. But there's a more elegant way of doing it by using something like an appositive or a relative clause. And that's what I've been asking my students to do. It doesn't take that much time. Obviously, I'm a psychology teacher, not an English teacher. And I have to weigh up the amount of time that I can devote to teaching these grammatical constructions to my students and how much time that I need to spend teaching them the content that they need to learn for psychology. But what I found is it really isn't that much time that I need to spend teaching these sentence structures, because generally they already know it. In their English lessons, they are learning what relative clauses are. They're learning how to use them. But what doesn't necessarily happen is they transfer that knowledge to different subjects when they need to do the writing. So here are a couple of other samples of writing from my students, which you probably can't see very well. I apologize. But the bits that I'm highlighting are the relative clauses that they're using, or the appositives that they are using to define the Tier 3 vocabulary that they have to use in their answers. And again, I just want to stress that it took 5 minutes of lesson time for me to say to them, okay, here's a quick definition of what an appositive is. Here's an example that we can relate to psychology, a psychological term, and an appositive that goes with it. You've done this in English, haven't you? And the students start nodding. Yeah, we know what you're talking about. Okay, so now as you answer this question, just look for a place where you can put a really well-placed appositive or really well-chosen relative clause. And when they do that, the effect on their writing is that it just takes it to another level. It really elevates the writing. And again, so I'm going to refer back to Freya's talk at the beginning, the importance of students being able to express themselves coherently in a sophisticated way at length which is what they have to do in their psychology exams, is absolutely essential. That's fairly new territory for me, I have to be honest, but with really not much input from me, I've seen some really good results. So it's something I'm really looking forward to taking further. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about today. So just to recap, I'm trying to promote literacy in my psychology lessons by not just encouraging my students to read the psychology books that we have available to them, but actively facilitating their access to them by suggesting to them the most relevant or the most pertinent parts of books that they should be reading. Explicitly teaching tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary, and really making deliberate, conscious decisions about particularly which tier 2 language is most appropriate. And then trying to make links with the grammar that they're learning in their English lessons and applying that to the writing that they do in psychology. And I think it's a really good activity or really good exercise would be for the teacher of any subject to go and talk to the English teachers in your school and just find out what grammar are your students learning, what sentence constructions, what grammatical constructions have they learned recently, what can you then apply to the writing that your students need to do in your subject. I am more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has right now or later on Twitter. You can contact me there at Andrew Farmer 80, or just come and say hello if you want about psychology or about primary as well if you want. And that's it for me.
Andrew, thank you so much. Wonderful talk. Yeah, I mean, I also teach psychology, and you've brought up some things that I'm going to take away and use in my classroom. And I think the thing I've learned the easiest is that actually it's not that difficult, and it's really quite quick, but has a huge impact, right? And then the examples you've given there, it's just like so obvious yet not obvious. I don't think I would have thought about it until you talked about it there. So thank you so much. We haven't actually got much time for questions. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but
I've talked at least twice as long as I said to you that I would. So sorry.
That's fine. It's not a problem. I mean, you've generated a lot of interest, I think, on Twitter, and thank you so much. You've given us a really lovely framework that any teacher, not just English teachers, can use to help teach literacy in the classroom. So thank you so much, Andrew, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you for offering the chance, Dan. And yeah, anyone who wants to ask anything, give me a shout on Twitter, please.
Brilliant. You're an absolute star, Andrew. I'm going to remove you now and have a good Saturday.
Yeah, likewise. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. So Andrew there, talking about literacy in psychology, but I think there's lots there for us to talk about for other subjects as well, not just psychology, and it's a lovely approach that he's taken. We've got our next speaker coming up. It's Frances. I'm going to add her to the stream. I'm hoping she's there. Yes, there we go. Hello, Frances.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you too. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I was looking forward to this moment. Didn't have lunch. Didn't have anything right now. Here in front of the screen just in case.
So much nervous, so much excitement. No, it's great to have you. Do you want to give the? I mean, obviously we've been in contact a little bit. Do you want to give the listeners, viewers, a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yes, please. Thank you. So my name is Frances, and I teach at the International School of Milan. That's in Italy. I teach grade 6. But I started off not really knowing that I wanted to be a teacher. So I got a degree in something completely different, and I needed a part-time job. I admit it. So that's where I ended up working with children, very young children, like 5-year-olds, and I just fell in love with their passion of learning, their curiosity, and I just wanted to find out more about how they learned. So I made my way up from teaching assistant in early years to grade 6 team leader, exhibition coordinator, mother tongue coordinator, and yeah, so now I'm here.
and now you're talking to us today. It's going to be fantastic. Yes. You're talking about key concepts in the PYP. Key concepts are a thing that I suppose run into the NYP as well, very very prominently. I don't want to ruin your talk, but are they so crucial to the PYP? As in, does it frame everything that you do, or is it a case of something useful?
I'm so glad you just asked this question, because I'm a very practical person before being a teacher, and I need something that works, okay, straight away, that I can use just in any situation with any age group. And key concepts are fundamental because I'll show you in the presentation, but they really allow it to make sense of the world around us, at whatever age or whatever stage of our learning experience we are at.
Wonderful. That sounds awesome. So whilst you get your presentation up, I think you need to share your screen and stuff. Just again to say that we are, this event is only possible due to the generosity of Pupil Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. So please do check them out. Their support is very much appreciated and key to the success of events like this. So hopefully, Francis, there you go. There's your slide. Oh no, wrong one.
Okay.
Here we go. There we go. There we go.
Second, almost ready. There we are.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to leave you to it. I'll leave you to it, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Frances. I'm going to say it again, and I'm here just to show you briefly how to scaffold learning through the use of the key concepts in the PYP. And I teach at an International School of Milan. So because it's lunchtime, I'm in Italy at the moment. In any case, more or less, we're all the same. I thought of a little menu that includes key concepts. So we'll be looking at what the key concepts are. So that would be form, and then how they work. That would be function. We've got change, which means how can we change the students' approach to learning and teachers' approach to teaching. And then we will be reflecting upon our teaching practice to see how to implement key concepts. And if we are, how best we can do that. So as I said, here's the little menu here for you. Just very briefly, the PYP, what is it? It's the primary year program. So it involves students from age 3 to age 12. I currently teach grade 6, which is the end of the PYP, but is also a first year in middle school for some schools. And the PYP just allows students to be engaged in their learning, to be motivated, and to turn into independent learners who are responsible for their own learning experience. We support students, providing them with learning opportunities to develop their skills that become transdisciplinary and possible to apply in any situations. But we also support the personal values the students create during these very important phases of their growth from age 3 to age 12. And before talking about key concepts, what do we mean by concepts? Well, we've got so many ideas around us. They're abstract, they're concrete, but in order to be able to communicate, to understand each other, and to take action on these big ideas, we need to group them. And that's what we intend by concept. So when I have a concept like a chair, all I need to say is wooden or plastic to both understand what we mean or what I need. Royal chair, we all have an image of a royal chair. So a concept is the opportunity for us to communicate. And in that sense, then, what is a key concept? Is the key that helps to unlock the understanding or scaffold our understanding of these big ideas. So that when we have students who have to complete a research task such as the human brain, we hopefully won't have students who will just find information for the sake of or to please the teacher's expectations, but they will find information because they truly find the pieces of information relevant and meaningful, and they can find a sense into what they're doing. So my challenge here today with you is to explain to you what the key concepts are and how to use them using the key concepts. So I'm going to start with form. Form is a key concept. You see it there in blue that answers to all. It's a question is, what is it like? And all the questions and all pieces of information that are linked to this big question allow us to develop our understanding. So what is a key concept? Well, first of all, there isn't just one key concept. There are 7 key concepts: form, function, perspective, connection, causation, responsibility. And we also have, sometimes when we're looking into the internet for some kind of extra resources, sometimes we see there are 8 key concepts. That's because originally reflection was a key concept. Then we've understood that we reflect just on anything that we do, just before we start an activity, while we're working on the activity, and at the end of a learning intention. So reflection doesn't need to be a standalone key. We have it there. We have it in everything we're doing. So there are 7 key concepts. These key concepts help to engage in abstract thinking. So when we got ideas that are very big, particularly according to the age group, we use key concepts to decode the information, to understand the concepts. They're abstract, they're universal, and they're timeless. It means that you can apply just to any subject, any age group, any language, any areas of learning. And that's how I use them the most. You can see them now in a beautiful vision. We got all the key concepts: change, form, responsibility, connection, perspective, causation, function. They got a little question that goes to it, and they're so visual. You can link them to a color, you can link them to a shape. Obviously, if you're new to the use of key concepts, having as a visual a key allows the students to remember as well the terminology. It's really nice to have in your classroom. But when you're not using visuals anymore, perhaps you are going to MYP and then diploma, then you've got descriptions that allow the students to make connection with the use of the key concepts. So not only we think of what is it like, but also we imagine to find information that allows us to understand everything as a form. And has got features. It can be absorbed, identified, described, categorized. And that's just an example for form. So how do I use the key concepts in the PYP? I use them to develop students' understanding. We've understood this. It's important the students to take ownership of their learning. So they need some tools that are practical, immediate, easy to use, and they can apply just to everything. And as I said before, I started off with the very, very young students from transition. And I did use the key concept a lot as well in early years. Here's a little example. So using a story, for example, to start with, we read stories to kids for so many reasons: to broaden their imagination, their vocabulary, to have something to create a connection with. And key concepts allow you to go through these kind of discussions. So reading The Three Little Pigs, we can then use the key concept form to discuss about the elements that compose each house. Okay, what's the house of the first pig like, and the second pig, and the third pig? To then move away from the story and think about our own experience. If you could choose, what your house would be like? This is a question you can go under form. And you don't have to go through all the key concepts when you're teaching a lesson or when you're helping students with their understanding. You can select the key concepts. For example, it would be interesting to look at the evolution of the housing system, or it's interesting to see function, what makes a house a safe house, to end up with something that students can do with that piece of information. And usually is under the key concept of responsibility. So now that I've learned all of this about the houses and the pigs and the animals, what can I do about my learning experience? Well, I can imagine a list of do's and don'ts to keep my house safe. And this is when the little ones are thinking of locking the door, turning off the lights, and so on, keeping things safe. But as I said, from transition, I made all my way up to grade 6, and grade 6 needs to develop greater understanding of more tricky concepts. So when it comes to using visual routines such as mind maps, students are automatically going to a key concept that will allow them to focus on one element of their learning. And that's why we talk about scaffolding understanding. Because if I ask the students to create a mind map about going back to the human brain, I perhaps will have an A3 sheet of paper with just everything on it. If I direct, if I guide, if I support student with just the key concept form, then the student will be doing a mind map with the features or the elements that compose the concept that we are looking at. So there is also visual routine for the area that they are looking at. Flowcharts, for example, work really well with the idea of change. How have things changed over time? Connection works really well with the Venn diagram. You got the similarities and the differences, and that is the connection the students then become able to make between two or more things. So it could really, really be used from early years all the way up. And to be honest, I still use them myself when I need to learn about something, as, for example, when I was preparing for this presentation. When we were looking at the key concept of function, and I told you that I was going to show you how I use key concepts, here's an example. I'm not a subject teacher. I am a class teacher. So I teach maths and language and everything. But the PYP sees things as in a transdisciplinary way. That means that things are all connected. That allows me to make connections with different subjects, but also to use the key concepts in a variety of situations. So in this case, we were looking at bar graph for data handling, and students decoded their understanding or scaffolded their understanding using the key concepts. So function, how does a bar graph work? Perspective, when is it best to use a bar graph instead of a line graph? And my favorite in this case was connection. What element of maths should I know in order to be able to work on a bar graph, use or read a bar graph? The way I use it for maths, I use it for reading. Now, this is happening right now in grade 6. We are reading The Breadwinner as a class novel. And to make connections, to create empathy with the character of the book, we are looking at the key concepts, change and perspective. As you notice, the key concept remains the same. The visual is the same. What I'm changing is the way I'm formulating the questions. Sometimes, most of the times, it's a collaboration between the teacher and the students. So we are looking at the question that best fits with that key concept in order to get the understanding that we want to get from that concept. Sometimes we use the key concepts as teachers to assess, so pre-assess the students' understanding. And sometimes the students are choosing the key concepts to give us information of what they would like to find out more about or learn about. So here's another example of how I use key concepts, in this case for a unit. Units of inquiry are 6 in the PYP. There are in other curriculum called also topics. This was about the environment, and we needed to understand more, in this case, overfishing, to be able to go into, I love this key concept, responsibility. So now that we've learned everything about overfishing, what can we do about it? What is our responsibility? And we promote action with students when we have analyzed, when we've understood in depth something, what can we do with the learning? Key concepts, as I said, you can find them just everywhere on the internet. You can make them, you can print them out, you can laminate them. Currently in my classroom, I've got a set of key concepts up on the wall, and the key concepts are being made by the students. So we moved away from the idea of the key. They chose the visual that best fitted for what they believed was that key concept. And I loved how perspective is a magnifying glass, function is the 2 wheels, connection is a chain. So they're really showing me back their understanding of the key concepts. I also got small key concepts to keep in the middle of the desks, just in for when we're doing group discussion, because it helps the students to direct their conversation. Sometimes they just start talking about something and then they go off subject. Key concepts allow them to structure their thinking. And when they're structuring their thinking, they're structuring their language too. Here's another, the same image, but just to show you a bit better. They've all kind of nicely colored and put up on the wall. I was really proud of their work. And once again, another example, I used key concepts in so many other subjects. In this case, for example, the photo in the middle shows you metaphors. So we were doing a language focus. And to understand metaphors, not only we use form, not only we use function, but the following page talks about changes, how the use of metaphors has changed over time to be used then as well in persuasive language, in the language of advertisement. And it's so important. We keep talking about it. I've heard so many presentations about it, and it's happening. It's happening in every classroom. We are recognizing agency as being a very important engine in students' experience. Students have a voice, have a need to make choices, and have ownership of their learning. When we develop a language, connected to the key concepts, then we are allowing them to also be aware of the power that their learning experience has on them and on their life experience. So when we are teaching students that there is a powerful language to describe their thinking, and this language can be connected also to the key concepts, we are allowing students to be really, really owning their learning. There are so many resources, as I said, and I'm so happy that if you ask and if you're interested, I can share them with you. In this case, I found these on Twitter. And then I found these on Toddle, because one of the questions I had was, well, what if the person I'm talking to is not a class teacher? Because I'm quite consistent in the use of key concepts. I use them in so many ways, in so many situations. But what if I'm teaching just one subject? In that case, again, the internet comes to save our life and our day, because Toddle, for example, has got beautiful posters where you've got a key concept, and then for every subject, a possible description. Here's is just a starting point. For example, with change, you could do in language, how the language of poetry has changed over time. But obviously it's a starting point. You can adapt it in so many ways. The PYP, the IB is flexible in understanding that each environment, learning environment is different. Students are different, teachers are different, needs are different. So when we start with something simple like a key concept, so you can adapt it to your needs and obviously your students' needs. And then again, how do I use key concepts? I use them as well to ask students to reflect on their use of key concepts, or reflect on their learning. Just to summarize then and to conclude with my presentation, we've looked mainly at form and function. Responsibility is up to you, how you think that you can use the key concepts, how you can implement a bit more to create more independence in the way the students approach to their learning. There are 7 key concepts. They're universal, they're timeless, they have no boundaries in levels, in language, in subjects. They require very little preparation, if no preparation at all. You can print out, laminate, put up on the walls, or just mention them, and the students are becoming day after day more familiar and more autonomous in the use of key concepts. Now, for me, this is a lifesaver in so many situations. It makes sense to the students, it makes sense to me, and we come together with wonderful discussions and pieces of information that we didn't access before without the key concepts. Now, this is the conclusion to my presentations. As I said, if you got any questions, please drop me an email or find me on Twitter, Instagram. This is my name, surname. I'm Frances McRae, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much, Frances. That was absolutely fantastic. So much enthusiasm for the key concepts, and it makes so much more sense when you explain it like that. I suppose a question I've always wondered when people teach PYP or MYP and they talk about key concepts: if you weren't teaching the PYP curriculum, would you still use these key concepts in your teaching?
Again, I'm so glad you asked this question, because not knowing exactly.
I think for me, the internet's just
going
broken
to be an audience.
You're back. You're back. You went, but now you're back.
I thought perhaps. Okay, so now, sorry, I was saying, because I didn't know exactly if this presentation was going to be for international school teachers in the IB or in any other curriculum, I chose key concept for that reason. Because if I were not teaching in the PYP, or in any case, if I ever move to another curriculum, that is the number one thing I'm going to steal from the curriculum, because it just makes more sense to students to think about the function and the form and the connection. And I believe, and it goes a bit with what we said in other presentations, I believe in the power of language. When we develop a language, we develop our thinking, and we become so much powerful, and we own what we think and what we believe. So to create this connection between the language and the concept using key concepts, I think is powerful in wherever curriculum.
Wonderful. Have you ever taught TOK? We had a TOK presentation earlier from Craig, and in TOK they talk about language shaping knowledge, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, and you've just kind of summed it up really nicely there, that language shapes our knowledge and knowledge shapes our language. Maybe you should have a look at that as well.
Well, what I think, and this is my personal view, I don't believe in one particular curriculum that would be the best compared to all the others. I think the best curriculum is when teachers try to find a balance that really works for the age group and the subject and the environment, the culture. So because I started off not with the idea of being a teacher, I had to find the survival elements or tools that would just help me, because I was like in panic, like I have no experience. So whatever works for me is the best. And whether you're in the UK, in Italy, in Dubai, or anywhere in the world, whatever subject you're teaching, at the end of the day, we want students to be thinkers, critical thinkers, independent, and that they feel confident with their learning. And I think key concepts is a tool that allows that to happen.
Wonderful. You've summed it up beautifully there. It's a tool. It's a useful tool, and it's up to the teachers to find that balance. No, wonderful sentiment, and thank you so much. So lovely to hear
Thank
someone
you.
talk so enthusiastically about the PYP and key concepts. So thank you very much for your time. You can go and have some lunch now.
Yes.
Very important. Anyway, lovely to meet you and hear you
to meet
speak,
you too.
and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, and take care,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wonderful talk there from Francis. And next up, we have Lucy. I'm going to add Lucy to the screen. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm very well. It's been a fun-filled day so far. We've had some wonderful
Really
speakers
has.
on, and we've still got more to come. We've still got 3 speakers to go.
It's been very high energy, and just watching Francis, just the energy coming off her was fantastic. And
it's crazy, right? I'd love to be in her classroom.
To myself with so many of the things she was saying, particularly about the use of curriculums together. So I think I'm going to be chatting to her some more and seeking her out for some tips and tricks. So that was phenomenal.
Fantastic. And so obviously you are also phenomenal. Thank you very much for joining us today. Do you want to give the viewers, listeners, a little bit of a background about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Oh, yeah, I can do. So my name's Lucy. I've been a teacher for 7 years now. I lose track, but an international teacher for 3. I'm currently a year 5 teacher at what is currently a primary school in Portugal, but is working to be a through school. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm a house leader for a house called Floresta, which is great. And we won the House Cup last year, which was very exciting. And key subject interests are maths and humanities, which is a strange combination. But I hated maths in school, and so made it kind of my teaching mission to make it better for myself, and in turn have loved it, and hopefully I'm making it better for my pupils as well.
Wonderful. Nothing better than trying to change something for the better, right?
Absolutely.
Very good. So I'm going to whack your presentation up. There we go. You are there. I'm going to hand over to you. Looking forward to this. International mindedness in the primary classroom.
Okay. So before I start this, I should be clear that, a bit like Freya said with hers, I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey here. Does it answer questions? Maybe in part. Is it conclusive? Not especially. But it's an area that interested me, and I went down what I call a research rabbit hole, which I do with a lot of topics that I'm interested in. And this is what I found. So I'm essentially taking you on a journey through what I found as I was doing this. So, international mindedness. Before I went any further, I wanted to try and define this in my own mind, try and define what it means, what I understand by it. So I thought, okay, I'll split the 2 words up. International and mindedness. And in terms of international, that is not an exhaustive list, but it's kind of the highlights of the list for me. And some of you may agree with what's on there. Some of you may think, well, you've missed out a number of keywords there, Lucy, but these are the ones that I wanted to include for now. And then mindedness made me laugh. The state of being minded. Well, duh, yes. Okay, being mindful, thinking about something, right? Okay. So we're being mindful about international and what that means sort of as an overall concept. Okay, right. Now what? So then I went on a hunt for what other people felt about this. And I thought, maybe naively, that these would all be positive, people thinking about, the wider world, global mindedness, things like that, etc. And there were quotes like that. So, for example, Christopher Allen's quote about learning to be a global neighbor, I thought, okay, great, fantastic. Carolyn Savage, who we will revisit again, understanding and respecting values, cultures, etc. Okay, I thought, all right, getting warmer here. But then I found the flip side to this, and I thought, oh, right, okay. But it's important to explore the slightly more negative side with the positive side. I should also, you're reading Martin Skelton's quote, there on the right. And I should say, as a caveat, that he's actually a huge fan of international mindedness and actually really embraces it. But he also recognizes the issues attached to a concept like this. So he said it's a huge dumping ground for everyone's pet themes. And in my mind, that means, okay, there's always something that's in vogue. There's always something that we're talking about. Is this just the kind of the here and now thing or the in thing? I don't know, maybe. And then when it came to Terry Hayward's quote, well, we know what we mean. And I thought about this and I was transported back to my childhood studies degree, which was quite a while ago now. And it reminded me of the multi-agency approach we talk about when we talk about children. So we talk about police, social workers, of course, us as teachers. And within that, and within these agencies, there's a lot of jargon that gets used, that gets used. So we have terminology and phrases and things that we understand and we know what we mean, but to the uninitiated or to someone who doesn't really understand these things or needs a better understanding, it's not really good enough to say, well, I know what I mean, but I can't really explain to you what I mean. And in terms of international mindedness, we can see here that people view it in different ways. So is there a concrete definition? Well, not really. Okay then. So I also appealed to my colleagues at work, and they got an email from me saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm presenting on international mindedness. What does it mean to you? Now, of course, I hit them at a very busy time, and this is by no means a reflection on my relationship with my colleagues. I should say that I get on with them very well, but only one teacher came back to me, Johnny, who's actually new to us. So I'm very grateful to him. But once again, you can see that his quote reflects all the things that we've looked at so far in terms of things about cultural background, language, etc. So, okay. Now, you're going to think I have copped out a little bit here, because the idea for me originally was to try and form my own quote, my own soundbite about international mindedness, and try and kind of piece together everything that I'd found, all these different quotes, all this information, to come up with my understanding. And I couldn't do it, which you'll think, okay, well, Lucy, if you can't do it, then how on earth are we supposed to follow you for the rest of this? You should end your talk here. I'm not going to, but I picked out all of these words and I created one of these, well, my version of a word cloud, because I find the ones that you often see where all the words are mishmashed together a bit hard to look at. So I picked out what I felt were the real key points here, the real key concepts. And again, not an exhaustive list. You will probably find things that I have missed, and you can jump in at any point and say what you think those are or list them in the comments. But for me, these were the main pulls, the main targets, the main things that I found. So although I didn't manage to get a complete quote, I thought, okay, so I've got a lot of ideas swimming around here. But someone who has managed to put it together more concisely, again, we're back with Carolyn Savage, and this to me is kind of the ultimate goal with international mindedness, or certainly something that to me is the closest thing that I have at this moment in time. And the two things I want to draw on here are the idea of self-awareness and the idea of empathy, which aren't international mindedness concepts as such. They're more fundamental universal concepts that we teach children from a very young age, or that we help children to understand from a young age, because without those, you can't move around in amongst your family, you can't move around and be aware of people in your classroom. And so trying to move into the wider community, it's going to be problematic if you aren't self-aware and if you maybe don't demonstrate a level of empathy. And then of course the other things build around that. So when we come down to things like language skills, that is something that we can build on, and I know people have talked about today as we go through our school careers. So I'm not obviously going to talk about secondary schools too much, because as a primary teacher, it's not the realm I operate in, and it's not my focus for today. But through my research, I found that there is a greater focus on international mindedness in secondary schools overall. I attribute this to maybe having different teachers doing deeper dives into subjects, exploring subjects in more detail, speaking to people on a daily basis. And then, of course, IB is not the curriculum I teach, but I know that the International Baccalaureate Diploma Project, and in turn the CAS program as well, and IB all the way through from PYP up, international mindedness is part of everything that they do, part of what their ethos is and what they want their teachers to bring forward. So in IB schools, it's already, for the most part, a big part of what they do. But it's also more of a focus for students heading out into the world. So it becomes more of an idea at the end of a student or a pupil's school career, when they're looking to move on. be it to university, be it into careers, into the wider world. But of course, there are still pitfalls for those secondary teachers when it comes to international mindedness, but that's over there. And maybe those secondary teachers who've been involved today can think about that and think about where this fits in for them. But back to primary. So, of course, as I said to you, it's involved in the primary years program for IB already, but it appears overall, and from my research, to be less of a focus in primary school overall than secondary schools. And the problem that I found was that schools and teachers can be unsure of where to begin, where to start, how, when it comes to the 4 or 5-year-olds, the really young children in school, where on earth do you begin? Because you're not going to talk to them in the same way that you talk to a 7-year-old, 11-year-old, 15, 18. So you have to consider where children are developmentally. And that is a huge part for me of where to begin with international mindedness. So where did I go next? Well, I thought about, okay, well, what happens if we don't start, if we don't begin to consider international mindedness in any way at all, or it's not featuring in anything that we do as teachers? And I thought, well, we become very inward facing, and it's very easy to do when it's in your friendship groups, whether it's in your workplace and in schools. I do think we can become very sort of institutionalized, very kind of our immediate community. But the idea, certainly as international schools, is to be more outward facing, to think about the bigger picture, think more globally. Misunderstanding and misinformation, of course, are a huge problem as well. I was speaking to a colleague. Actually, she's not a colleague, she's a friend, but she works in another school, worked in another school here in Portugal. And she said to me, you know, without these ideas feeding into daily life, the problem you have is racism and things like that can seep in as well. But also, and this feeds into the idea of tokenism as well, she told me about an occasion where they had a whole event centered around sexism. And one of her pupils' responses to it was, well, I only have to care about this today. And of course, if you present something as a one-off event or as something that you're only doing or only kind of drip feeding in from time to time, of course, that's going to be reaction, because that's how you're presenting it. It's going to be, oh, well, it's just a one-off occasion. It's just a nice food festival. It's just something that, oh, okay, well, I thought about it, now on to the next thing. And as a result, there are huge missed opportunities. Okay, so where do we begin? Help, Lucy, what do I do here? I've got an EYFS class, or I've got a year 1 class. Where on earth would I begin with teaching them to be more globally minded? And the idea is to not start big. You can't start big with anything. You have to start small. So what does that look like? Well, at the most basic level, we need to be able to interact with each other. We need to be able to understand, empathize, share, just within the people nearest to us. So for young children, that's often quite simply just family and school. And I know there'll probably be an audible groan that I can hear across the world as I bring in Piaget and Vygotsky. So for those of you who did childhood studies degrees, or even, well, when you did teacher training, these are names that you are very, very familiar with. And whilst I don't want to unpack the criticisms that are attached to both these psychologist theories or theories and ideas, I know that there are critiques and all the rest of it, but there are still some core ideas that are relevant to this day and relevant to education. And Piaget said that children go through developmental stages, but the pre-operational stage, which is from the ages of 2 to 7, that's an enormous window of time, and enormous amount of time where children are actually in school and in those formative years. So in the British curriculum and in the British system, children start school at 4. But from an emotional and cognitive level, they're not the finished product. They're nowhere near the finished product. And they don't necessarily have the ability to understand those around them, not because they're trying to be horrible or not because they are dreadful in any way, but because they're just not there yet. They're just not ready for it. So before you even go anywhere near concept or wider concepts of international mindedness, you have to understand where they are developmentally, and and this is where the Vygotsky parts come in, that more knowledgeable individuals, i.e. us, come in and help us, come in and help and support, because that's really, really important. Children need that guidance from us in order to be able to start understanding how to interact with one another before they even start the academic side of things, how to be in a classroom, how to share things, because they do need to be taught how to do that. Often it's not necessarily sort of ingrained in them. Some children do take a bit longer to get there. So the idea to start with is to try and move away from that egocentrism, try and move children away from being me, I, and getting them to, as Carolyn Savage said when she talked about people being I say the finished product, but people being internationally minded, that empathy and that self-awareness, that starts as these children understand how to share, as they understand how to be with each other, as they understand not to maybe shout out in class, as they understand that the others around them do have feelings and things like that. So again, starting very, very small and gradually building out for them to understand more and more and more about the world around them. So I wanted to think about what this approach looks like more school-wide. Of course, it is tricky when you don't have a concrete definition of something. It's difficult to then say, well, how on earth are we going to implement that? How on earth are we going to take something that's not got a sort of solid definition and then move it into our schools? But I don't necessarily feel that's a bad thing. I don't feel that by not having a one size fits all, it's that we're in any trouble here, because to me, international mindedness means something different to someone teaching in Oman or teaching in Dubai or teaching in Italy or teaching wherever they happen to be. It's different things in different places as well. And I think that's all right. You may disagree, but I think as long as, and this starts at the top, where you have a commitment from management, from boards, from whoever it is. I mean, my school's under an organization called Globe Educate, who are very internationally minded as well. But as long as there is an agreement of the kinds of things and the kinds of ideas that the school wants to promote and push forward, then that is a great start. And that then feeds down into school ethos and values. And what you'll find is that most of your schools are doing this already, that built into their ethos are the ideas of being kind to each other, being empathetic, community, whatever that looks like. Understanding, tolerance, which is not my favorite word, but I know it comes up from time to time. All these things already exist, but need to be celebrated more and need to be pushed forward more and need to be promoted more. And that goes beyond things like assemblies and actually needs to feed directly into the curriculum. And this is very important in terms of topic choices or topics at primary level, books that we use and things like that. So for example, I teach British curriculum, and there are things within that that don't really have any relevance to children living in Portugal. So my colleague and I, when we were looking at history and what to teach, decided to look at Portuguese explorers because that has relevance to our children where they are today. But the mistake we made when we did it the first time was that we very much focused on the kind of the adventure side of these explorers and the fact that they were from Portugal and set out and all the rest of it. What we neglected, and on reflection, what I look back on, is that we didn't talk about really where they ended up, where they went, the impact that that had, or maybe how they acted once they arrived in certain countries. And of course, the danger with that is you're being selective. You're not saying, okay, you know, as well as the fact that these adventures happened and how fantastic and all the things they brought back, there is still a side that affects the world to this day. And without doing that, I think missed an opportunity to really teach these children about, well, taking the topic even further and taking it into, yes, a slightly darker side. And of course, I have to be mindful when teaching children in that way. But I think that it's important that they do understand from a young age that actually there are things that happened in the past and things that continue to happen in the world around us that you're going to feel are not okay and are not all right. But you need to understand that this exists so that you can, you know, formulate your own opinions and in turn embrace that international mindedness and move forward. But of course, for all these things to happen, teacher development and CPD is absolutely crucial. It's vital that we understand the information we are putting out into the world, that we understand the concepts, that we understand within our curriculum, that we're not spreading that misinformation, we're not spreading misunderstanding. So we are constantly, as teachers, and I'm constantly conscious of putting my foot in it, as I call it, because sometimes you do get it wrong, or like I did when I missed out on the opportunity to take my explorers topic further than I should have done. But we need to get together as staff and make sure that we do understand things, that we're comfortable with what we're doing as well, because otherwise, if we're not practicing it and we're not delivering it in the right way, we can't expect this whole model that I've put together to work. We can't push that forward. We can't drive that forward, because if we don't believe in it and we're not confident in it, how on earth can we move that forward? So I appreciate that's a very bare bones structure. And again, you know, this would need a lot of fleshing out and a lot more detail. And as far as the curriculum side of it goes, I could have done the whole presentation on that, but I didn't. So, of course, there are pitfalls, which I've touched on already. And I'm sure all of you, myself included, in international schools have held some kind of food festival or something like that at some point. We've all done it. And there's no reason why those things shouldn't continue. There's absolutely no reason at all. But it needs to be part of a bigger picture. And it needs to be something that's not just that once a year, that kind of, okay, right, we've ticked that box, now we're done. But as George Walker identifies, part of this problem and part of the reason international mindedness is still not quite as widespread as it should be is still that struggle with that definition. And as I continued on this journey, of course, has it become any clearer in my mind? I wouldn't say especially. I know what I think it is, and I know what I feel it is, and I can explain how what I feel and what I think. But that might be different to the person next to me. But I think the fact that it is a conversation, we shouldn't shy away from it. Just because we're not 100% clear doesn't mean that it suddenly gets buried and we forget about it. It's all the more reason to continue talking and to continue trying to work it into our schools in whichever way we can. So, in summary, and this is kind of where I've concluded for the moment, schools need to decide what international mindedness means for them and commit to that from the top down. Acknowledge that for the youngest children in school, it's basic skill development. Start small. There is absolutely no need to be panicking and thinking, oh my goodness, they need to understand how the wider world works. No, they don't, because they're not developmentally there. There's no way that you can do that. They need to start working on the skills so they can just move around in their immediate classroom community. Then you can go bigger. And I think that that's really, really important. Of course, touched on several times, not just having token events. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be infused throughout the school. And I think infusion is a great word, that it touches everything that we do on a daily basis. And of course, the curriculum as well, with as many ideas linked as possible to international mindedness, not missing those opportunities like I did, and being acutely aware of what you're teaching and making sure that you are pushing for that CPD, because it isn't always forthcoming, as we know. But in order to make sure we are being sort of the best international schools or the best schools we can be, I think this is a huge part of it. And we need to make a bigger song and dance about it than maybe we are at the moment. And that's it from me. So
thank you. Awesome. Thank you for your awesome talk. You said it was a whistle-stop tour through a rabbit hole of your thoughts, but I think it's been fascinating to see you break it down and then kind of build it back up again. The 5 Fs, I've never heard that before, but that's brilliant. It shouldn't be a 5 Fs approach. Where did you get that from? Obviously, the quotation, but was that kind of on your mind from the start, the 5 Fs kind of that influenced, or did you find that after you've already thought that we shouldn't do this token event sort of thing?
I sort of had the idea of kind of token events in my head, and I wanted something to underpin that. And it's actually an article that dates back as far as 2002. And actually, I do have an entire list of references.
Brilliant.
I hadn't Harvard. There's 2 pages of that. I hadn't Harvard reference since my gosh. I can't remember.
Joking.
I put them in there thinking, oh, I'll kind of be really smart about this. So if anyone wants the additional reading, it is there, and I can't quite spot it. I don't know if it's on that first. Oh, it is. It's that one at the bottom, the Beyond Food Festivals and Flags. So you can definitely find that online, and it's a very interesting read. I've actually read it in quite considerable detail, but well worth it if you want to explore international mindedness in greater detail.
Wonderful. And then I suppose my question for you is going to be, you talked about it got to start from the top. So it's obviously going to be part of that culture and ethos. Do you think there's anything that teachers can do from the ground upwards, obviously not just in their classrooms, but to kind of push the senior team to kind of taking it more seriously as part of the culture and ethos?
Oh, gosh, I think opening up the conversation and going to them and saying, look, you know, we are an international school. We have children in from all over the world. We need to be doing more. It's kind of, you've got to push them sometimes. And I think any SLT team or senior management team worth their salt, I'm going to probably get in trouble for this, but would be receptive to that, particularly in an international school.
Absolutely, especially if you're not doing an IB. I mean, if you're doing an IB curriculum, you're kind of enforced to, even if someone doesn't buy in. I think there's that forced opportunity. But I do agree with you. Senior leaders need to take it seriously and build it into that kind of culture and ethos and get away from the 5 Fs. Couldn't agree more. Lucy, thank you so much for your time today. Wonderful talk. I'm going to put up a comment. Absolutely brilliant again. Yeah, you're absolutely brilliant, as always. And thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy your Saturday.
You as well.
We'll speak soon.
I'm going to go back to listening now.
Very good. See you later. Wonderful. So a wonderful talk there from Lucy about international mindedness. Absolutely fantastic. We've now got Rich, who's going to come in. We're going to mix up the order slightly. I'm going to bring up Rich. Here's Rich. Hi. How are you doing?
There. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. You're all the way in Mexico, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I've been teaching in Mexico for about 4 years now, and I've taught there as well, earlier in the 2010s as well.
Fantastic. So this is early morning for you. Everyone else has kind of been Middle East, Europe based so far, but this is early morning for you. Thank you for giving up your Saturday morning for us. For the people who don't know you, do you want to give us a brief overview of your background, what you do, where you come from?
Yeah, sure. So I started teaching way back in 2008 in the UK. I'm a physics teacher and still am a physics teacher. I moved abroad in early 2011 to Mexico, to a different school than the one I'm working at right now. I then moved to Brazil and lived there for a couple of years, as well as Germany afterwards for a couple of years as well. And I moved back to Mexico in 2019, just before the pandemic started.
Wonderful. And you're going to be talking to us today about the Duke of Edinburgh International Award.
Yes, that's right.
Wonderful. And I think there's loads of schools. My school certainly does it. I think there's lots of schools out there that do this. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in it. Whilst you, do you want to get your share your screen and do that up now? Whilst you're doing that, I just obviously wanted to say thank you again to our sponsors, Pupil Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this wonderful free Teachmeet online. So huge thank you to them. We're going to be, we've got 2 more speakers. We've got Rich, who's going to come now, and then after that, we've got Briley, who's going to be talking about EAL in the classroom. So still 2 more speakers. It's been fantastic so far. And really looking forward to this one too. Hoping you get your talk up.
Yes. I've just got a new computer and it was like, oh, you need to open system preferences. I was like, what?
Oh, no, that's a shocker. Oh, no, now we can't even see you. Ah!
Oh, God.
Right. The wonders of live streaming events.
I'm so sorry about this.
Oh, great. I mean, it's happened before. It's okay. I'm sure it will happen again. If you need a minute, we can do something else. Look, you're back. Now you're back on video.
Let me see if I can present really quickly. I'm really sorry about this.
It's happens. It's the beauty of live shows.
I can add it through Google Slides. I'm sorry about this.
It's all right. So it's not coming up. Do you want me to play a minute video whilst you get that sorted?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry about this.
It's okay. It's not a problem. We're going to play another video.
Actually, I'm good if you're ready. I think.
We're gone then. Do you want to present? See if it comes up. You're gonna go. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, awesome.
Wonderful. Cool. There we go. Now you're up. I'm going to leave and wonderful. Over to Rich.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm so sorry about that. That's. Ironically, in Mexico, we had 2 years of online learning. We went from online learning from March 2020 to August of 2021. So nearly a year and a half of online learning. And I'm still terrible at technology sometimes. So I apologize for that. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about getting started with the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award, or sometimes it's just called the International Award, or I just call it DofE or whatever. And I'll just tell you a little bit about me first to start off with. So like I was saying earlier, I graduated with a degree in physics in the late 2000s, and in the early 20s, In my early 20s, I was very keen on outdoor activities, particularly skiing, mountaineering, and things like that. I was kind of peer pressured into doing a PGCE when I was when I was graduating, because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. It turned out I really loved it. I taught in the UK for a couple of years, and I moved to Mexico in the early 2010s. I've worked in Mexico, Brazil, and Germany, and then I'm currently moved back here to Mexico. And in terms of international awards, I've helped or run international awards in pretty much all my schools, apart from my first school in Mexico. So I've led expeditions with students in all of these countries: Mexico, Brazil, Germany, and also taken students from Mexico to Costa Rica as well. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is just sort of what the similarities are with the Duke of Edinburgh Award in the UK, what are the differences and what to expect. And if you're new to an international school, what do you want to, if you're new to an international school and want to get involved with the Duke of Edinburgh's award, how can you get involved? What are people looking for in terms of award leaders and running awards? So the main thing is, in terms of similarities, it's very similar to the Duke of Edinburgh Award in the UK. It's basically the international branch. So there are the same level of awards throughout. There's gold, silver, and bronze, and they start at similar age ranges. So if you're familiar with the Duke of Edinburgh, you'll feel very comfortable with that. So bronze starts at 14 years old. Generally, in most schools, that means that it's run in school, and it's normally an opt-in by most schools, and most schools will start the Bronze Award in year 10, so when students are around 15 years old. Normally, that's a whole cohort of students that will enter that. Pretty much in every school I've worked in, most students will all sign up. It's very, very rare that not all of the students will sign up, or only a few students will opt out. They'll then go on their practice expeditions, complete the similar areas that they need to complete for the Duke of Edinburgh Award. So at bronze, they have to do 3 months of a sport or a physical activity, 3 months of a community service, and 3 months of a skill of some kind. And then they need to specialize in one and take one of those to a 6 months time window. So it's really nice, because it means that basically you start that process at the beginning of year 10, and then by the end of year 10, students are being signed off, having completed the award, and it's something they can work towards the end of the year. The requirements for each of these areas are very, very similar. And then what we tend to find is that in year 11 onwards, probably about 25%, 20% would continue on to silver. And then normally in around year 12 and year 13, the students, maybe around half of those students, like the really hardcore students, I like to say, will go on to complete gold, the gold award as well. So yeah, the similarities are mainly the setup, what the students are expected to achieve, the main requirements. The main differences are, I would say, first off, the main differences are the expeditions, and the difficulty in the expeditions when you come from the UK are two things. First off, I've led expeditions in Brazil, Costa Rica, a little bit here in Mexico, and in Germany, and in a lot of countries outside of Europe, particularly in Latin America, the expeditions are a lot more physically demanding than they are in the UK. I remember when I was doing my bronze practice expedition as a student myself, excuse me, back in the early 2000s, my bronze practice expedition was a very nice, gentle walk around the New Forest, because I'm from Hampshire. But for students in Brazil, we would go to the highlands in Mexico, and they would do their practice expedition would be first hiking up a mountain that was 800 meters tall with full backpack, and then we'll be camping on the top of the mountain for a night, and then would descend afterwards, and then also be expected to cook their own meals. It would be wild camping, so there wouldn't be bathrooms, so we would have to train the students on how to use shovels and things like that to use the bathrooms when they need to go and things like that, which caused a bit of a shock among some of our more pampered students. And these expeditions are a lot more rugged because the culture of sort of walking in expeditions are very different to the UK. So there are not like ramblers about and things like that. As award leaders, we would have to walk the trail beforehand, a weekend beforehand, and we would have to get permission from farmers and people like that to make sure that we were not like trespassing on anyone's land. The other difficulty is in terms of the expeditions is that the quality of the maps is very, very poor. So for example, in Brazil, the maps were old military maps from the 70s. And so when you were doing an expedition, we would have guides that would go with us to help because they knew the route very well. And they would say, yeah, on the map here, there's a river, but yeah, that river's not existed for 20 years. So just ignore that bit. Also, the scale of the maps, when you come from the UK, you're used to it being, Ordnance Survey, really precise, really excellent maps. Most maps here are 1 to 50,000 scale. So we don't focus as much in the expedition, and we can't focus as much on navigational skills. We normally have to pick routes or pick routes that are very easy to navigate. And the things that we focus on more is more we call it more the adventurous journey style of things. So we focus more on students overcoming a challenge, as working together in a team, maybe of people that they're not necessarily used to working with, but also as well focusing on more skills such as campcraft. How can they be responsible young adults? How can they set up a camp properly? How can they set up a camp safely? Can they cook their own meals? Can they look after the camp? Can they leave no trace? Can they make sure that they, don't leave rubbish lying around and things like that? And that's sort of the area that we have to focus on in terms of that difference. The recording as well for the main thing for the recording of the activities is a little bit different as well. We have an online record book, which is very it's very hit and miss, and it's very unuser friendly, and that can be a little bit of a frustration. And that's one of the actual frustrations in terms of getting students to complete their experiences, to complete their recording of their skills, of their physical activities, of their service. We have to really chase them up a lot more than I would say in UK schools. I think this is also possibly because the students are in the school with you. It's, all the whole year group that is doing it. So you find that there's a lot more admin than if you were running a Duke of Edinburgh award in the UK. And so that brings me on to this talking about training and being an assessor award leader. There's a lot more bureaucracy involved, I would say, in terms of the international award than the UK. The difficulty for a student to actually get the award and be assessed is a lot different. So for example, in the UK, if you're doing an award, there's normally an external assessor. Here in Mexico, but also in other countries, you're the assessor as a teacher. And so it's very easy to get students, particularly through bronze, through the award. But that also means that we really have to focus on making sure that their quality of their journal entries, that their logs for all of their activities are to a good standard as well. So yeah, that's pretty much the similarities and differences between sort of like the award here. The main thing I would say is that if you are wanting to get involved in an international award, from my experience, people who have come from running expeditions running awards in the UK think the expeditions will be slightly different. They think it's generally a case that you'll rock up in a minivan, the students will get out, go do their expedition, and you'll just wait for them at certain checkpoints. Because of the areas that we're in, and because there are certain dangers, we have to sort of essentially hike the route with the students. We normally tend to sit back by about 100, 200 meters, and we will make sure that the students are safe and they're essentially independent. But if they get into trouble, we would be there to be able to offer assistance. And this is mainly due to the remoteness of the areas that we're going hiking into, but also other dangers as well. So for example, in Brazil, you have dangers of things like venomous snakes and things like that you have to watch out for as well. So we need to be nearby to make sure that we're there if there is an emergency. And that's one thing that a lot of teachers find a little bit difficult to start off with, because the amount of physical exertion is really, really hard. So if you want to get involved in the international award in your school, the first thing I would say is speak to your award coordinator. There will be a head person there, and they're always looking for people to get involved. Normally what this will entail is just making sure that you're there to mentor or supervise students who are doing their skill, doing their social service, doing their physical activity, and to record or to sign off as an assessor that they have been doing that. But also as well, there are lots of opportunities to go on some fabulous expeditions as well. If you want to be involved in those things, I would warn you that you do need to be in relatively good physical shape, because some people can be really, really surprised by the level of physical fitness that is required. And it is amazing that our students can really push themselves through this as well. So just be warned from that. And yeah, that's me. So thank you very much for listening.
No, thank you very much for speaking. It's really interesting to hear the quite stark differences between that and the DFE in the UK. Do you feel that adds, the level of challenge and the kind of the extra kind of added things you've just talked about? Do you think that helps bring you together more as a kind of a team unit, you and the students? Do you feel that you can get some more kind of interactions and pastoral relationships going with the students in that case?
Absolutely. So, for example, when I first got here, I took a team of students, basically all of year 10, to Costa Rica, and we did their practice expedition and their final expedition, all basically in one long week residential course in Costa Rica, along with some other activities as well. It was pretty much the whole generation. There was a couple of opt-outs. That generation's now about to graduate, finishing their IB diploma program. And I'll be honest, when I first started teaching that year group, they were a challenge for me. They were, our students are lovely. So when I say a challenge, it's nothing compared to challenging students in the UK, but I found it very difficult to have a rapport with them. After the Costa Rica trip, the expedition, I was so impressed of seeing the difference in these young people just over the course of the week. It was almost like they matured like tenfold within 1 week, in terms of responsibility, in terms of, just looking after each other, looking after themselves, respect for themselves, respect for each other. And it's something that we've really bonded over as well. And while I was looking for this presentation, I was looking at some old pictures from that expedition, and I was actually showing them to the students. And that's something that we still, have as a bond, basically, with them. So yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic way to get to know the students. I think it's probably better than any pastoral. I'm going to get into so much trouble saying that, but I think it's probably better than any pastoral program in terms of getting to know the students, and in terms of the students getting to know you. Also, the fact that you're having to walk these routes with them, they see that you're not just saying right, off you go kind of thing. That you're leading by example, and that really fosters a lot of mutual respect between you and the students.
Sounds wonderful. I think you've hit a interestingly, listening to Lucy talk about international mindedness and the things that we need to consider there, and you've talked about the mutual respect there. And I think the opportunities that international schools afford, we sometimes have transient students who come for a couple of years, but actually things like this allow the students to really develop that kind of empathy and that kind of the whole approach that she was talking about. You've kind of exemplified a way in which we can bring people together from different cultures, from different backgrounds, with staff as well at the same time. So it's a wonderful opportunity, kind of bringing everything together. Thank you so much, Rich, for your time this morning. In your case, it's been lovely to hear from you. Have a lovely Saturday.
Thank you. Have a good evening, I guess.
Afternoon. It's afternoon here.
Afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Right.
See you later. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.
So wonderful. We have one more speaker. It's Briley. She's prepared a video for us. It's about EAL in the classroom. And before we do go to her, just one more shout out for our sponsors, Pupil Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. Their support means this is free, and that's fantastic. And so we have one more speaker. It's going to be Briley, and she's talking about EAL in the classroom. So I'm going to play that now, and we'll let her go.
Hi everyone, my name is Briley and I'm here today to talk to you about English as an additional language in the international context. I've been teaching since 2015 internationally, and previous to that I was in the UK. I really like you to think about the context of your school and the host country that you are living in. Have you learnt the local language of where you are? Do you know the languages of the students that you teach? In Turkish, we would say nasılsın to ask somebody how they are. Do you speak to the custodians or colleagues that you work with in their own language? And finally, when was the last time you created a resource targeted for your EAL students? Hopefully today I'm going to give you some examples of what you could do within your classroom. They may work for you, they may not, but I really hope that you learn something new from this video. We really need to be thinking more about English as an additional language within our classrooms. In 2020, 1.56 million EAL speakers were in England, and the Bell Foundation suggested that 1 in 11 schools had 50% of learners with English as an additional language. Even higher in international schools where we are. In fact, 5.8 million children are enrolled in over 13,000 international schools. But there's no agreed program for ESL students. CARDA actually carried out some research that said that teachers saw them as a problem, something that could be dealt with by all teachers, or that they seemed to do okay in the long run. So we didn't really need to have an ESL program that everybody actually used. Now, think about the parents. They pay a lot of money to go to these schools, but do they know how we're teaching them? Are they lucky enough to have a translator on parent information evenings, or do we translate school policies or revision guides to help them help their children? First of all, we need to judge the level of the English in the classroom. Not everybody is going to be at the same level. You may have level 1 or level 3 speakers, where level 1 is that they can just communicate within their name, or level 3, they can write in English proficiently, but there still may be some key words that they need some help on, or structuring of sentences. So think about the background of your students. Even if they went to another school, were they taught in English? How much were they taught? Have you spoke to the previous school about their English language levels? What about at home? What language are they speaking at home? If both parents don't speak English at home, how are we, helping them with homework, etc.? And are you carrying out an assessment to gauge that kind of level of English that the students might have within your classroom? In my school, I'm really lucky that we have a dedicated EAL department. They assess the students when they first come in, and this allows them to think about, do they need to have one-on-one support, or can they come into the classroom and allow the teachers to guide them with their tasks that they're doing and support them that way. Within this assessment, they write 100 to 150 words. They get no help from this at all, but it really does allow those teachers to gauge the level of English that they're at. Cambridge University have excellent kind of research that you can look into, and they have something called the Content Language Integrated Language, and it looks at how do curricular subjects actually support the students with English as an additional language. I really, think that anybody that's looking at improving how we teach EAL in the classroom should go and have a look at this website. It's really useful if you have to teach content, but obviously thinking about, well, how do I do that within that structure? So they ask you to look at the 4 C's: content, communication, cognition, and culture. I've just used Henry VIII as an example here, and think about the communication that the students would need to use. So cause and effect within the lesson. So Henry VIII obviously created the Church of England, but what was the effect for the people about creating this church? And then cognition. So in history, students would need to analyze the source material, and analysis is quite a high level skill. And how are students with EAL going to cope with that if they're not analyzing within their own language? But also the culture. Is there a cultural focus to this lesson? And if we're thinking about Henry VIII and creating new churches, we also need to be thinking about colonialism and whether those students can recognise patterns of this actually happening within their home country, and does that give them something else that they can talk about as well? Is the content that you're teaching, is it compatible, or are you obliged to actually teach keywords within there? So content compatible language is where you can use words that you've picked up in English lessons, and then the students obviously use that to support their learning. So in geography, we would use precipitation, but within a first or second language, they might be using rain. Source to mouth when we're talking about how a river moves, but in this case they may use small to largest. Now, the teacher, when they're planning lessons for new language learners, there's some key points that you want to think about. What does your student already know? Now, they might know a lot about, precipitation and rivers, etc., but they might not be able to express themselves in a second or third language. It's really useful to have a set of pictures ready with simple keywords that the students can write about in their own language, and then they can translate, using Google Translate, a dictionary, or if you have a dedicated helper, they can help that with you as well. Also, EAL students need very, very clear expectations. Sometimes we, just think that students should just write, when what's the problem with giving them images and translations that they can produce their work orally and have that same discussion with you, particularly at Key Stage 3. You also need to think about your wait time. Now, when we are asking questions, I'm sure you've all heard of that research where they say, oh, teachers, they give 7 seconds and then they're already thinking about moving on to that next person. Well, if you're doing this in a second or third language, you need a considerable more amount of time than 7 seconds to do that. So give the questions in advance if you can, so that the student can prepare the answer that you have targeted for them, or give them that wait time where they could talk the answer through with peers first before having to give a whole class response. Scaffolding is really, really important as well. You might only need to give it on a temporary basis because, they have to sit those GCSEs or IGCSEs within English, but to give them the scaffolding at first, it really gives the students confidence to be able to approach the next steps of their learning. The student could have definitions of key content translated prior to the assessment questions to build that confidence. I love this resource. I found it on Twitter the other day. I think it's brilliant. There's academic writing there. We all want them to be, good at writing academically. But we need to break this down for EAL speakers to make it more accessible for them, particularly if they are level 1 or level 2 writers. More diagrams show how the academic vocabulary works in practice, e.g. the word initially. Initially with this kind of key figure here, number 1, firstly, and give them this sentence structure. So Stan initially wanted to go to medical school. 1 pages are fantastic, but do they necessarily work for EAL speakers? We may need to judge that level of the speaker within the classroom because it's really not a one-size-fits-all approach. But again, fantastic resource. And then another resource that I found on Twitter, I love this resource. It does this, it's smaller, it's one kind of slide that looks at the word, that it's a noun, it has the meaning, it has the drawing. But we could take this one step further as well. What we could actually do is record how we're actually pronouncing these words for the students to go back and listen to again, pop it onto Google Classroom or that cloud drive system that you have. Retrieval practice, that buzzword. We know that schools are invested in this. We know that it has proven benefits of when we implement it in our classrooms. But what about our EAL speakers? Are we giving them enough time to complete those activities with everybody else? We know that EAL speakers need more time to be able to translate. These are fantastic resources for students to use, the 1.2, 0.3, 0.4. But if you get one of these as an EAL student, you have to translate all of this at the same time as what your peers are actually, having at the same time. But these are children, they're competitive. They want to be able to gain these points. So what could you do to improve these kind of retrieval practices? you could translate some of the questions into their home language, but also add images as well. You still stick to that same kind of 10 minutes, but you're allowing the student to be able to read the question and think about what they're doing at the same time. You can also give keyword sheets to help with longer assessment questions as well. And the students could highlight whether, they think they're sequences, processes, or figures as well within there. Again, these are probably for higher level students because there's no definitions with them to help them, but they are there in terms of what they can choose to use. Circle the correct answer in the orange box. I love these activities. All they have to do is circle the correct word, and as they read along the text, then they can get this process within them. This is really good for building on academic language for the students. So finally, the next steps. The Bell Foundation has some excellent resources to help you with translated documents in that you can print off. Please do speak to your EAL department if you have them and get involved. Talk to your students about possible areas that you are struggling or they are struggling with. And ask your teaching and learning coordinators to invest in some books for the CPD library. Lots and lots of people on Twitter in international schools are looking for EAL. They're helping with that. So you can go and you can just search within there and find all the people that you need. Thank you for watching.
So thank you to Bridie for preparing that wonderful talk on EAL. Certainly some useful resources, but also things for us to think about when we're supporting our students in the classroom. So huge thank you to Bridie there. That's it for today. It's been a wonderful Teachmeet. We've had loads of different speakers from all over the world talking about many different things that are relevant to international teachers, non-international teachers, people involved in education. And I hope that anyone who's been watching live or is watching the recording of this has been able to take something from today's talks. And there's always loads of things to discuss, and everyone you have been listening to is on Twitter, so please do follow them. Please interact and ask questions, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? Learning, growing together, and helping each other get better. Final then, thank you to our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't happen. They keep everything free from the Teachmeet side. So huge thank you to them, Pupil Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. Please do follow them and get involved as well. And that's it from me. And I wish you all a wonderful Saturday. Thank you to all the speakers. They were amazing. They've given up their time, energy and thought to prepare their talks for you. And huge thank you to them. And we'll see you next time for the next Teachmeet International event. Bye-bye.